I woke up on the mysterious continent of Pangu, where everyone else was still cowering in the safe zone while I had already surpassed the gods themselves, all because I'd landed here 500 years early. Not only could I pick up genius-level treasures wherever I wanted, but I'd also awakened a pair of titanium eyes that could see through everything in existence. In that moment, I let out a long, lonely howl at the sky. Someone, anyone, please introduce me to a partner already, I thought, because the soft morning sunlight was just too perfect for sleeping in. Then came a knock at the door, thump, 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 and my sister's voice called out, "Bro, it's already 10 o'clock. I bought you breakfast out of the goodness of my heart." After finishing my breakfast, I started messing around with the superpower I'd just awakened. A pocket dimension that could only hold myself, one that let me observe the outside world while staying hidden inside, lasting at most 2 or 3 hours before draining my spirit and knocking me unconscious. This space ability sounded impressive on paper, but honestly, I had no idea what it was actually good for. Then a voice rang out. "Ether Spirit Network construction complete. A total of 781,237,896 intelligent civilizations have been screened." Who said that? Who was talking? I spun around wondering if I'd finally lost my mind. The voice continued, "This is the Primordial Stellar Alliance. Ninth era civilization selection in progress. The continent of Pangu is currently being generated. Earth, the human race, 17 cities representing 17 branches of human civilization are being transported to the safe zone on the Pangu Continent now." What in the world was this? The Primordial Stellar Alliance? Civilization selection? While I stood there dumbfounded inside my pocket dimension, the ground beneath my feet suddenly vanished, Earth itself disappeared, and I found myself floating alone in the vastness of space. A famous line flashed through my mind. "This is one small step for me, one giant leap for mankind." I was the first human to fly into space with my bare body, and the answer was Earth itself. It was gone, but somehow I remained. Wait, what was that? I saw them, city after city, 17 in total, each one wrapped in what looked like a soap bubble, rocketing off in some direction at incredible speed. These cities were heading toward the safe zone, and I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Take me with you! I'm human too!" But nobody answered. No one even noticed me. I don't know how much time passed before that same cold voice spoke again. "Notice, all civilization branches have arrived at the safe zone. The time flow rate within the safe zone is only 1% of that on the Pangu continent. Each civilization may vote to lift the safe zone and begin exploring the Pangu continent. The ninth era civilization selection officially begins." In my despair, I forced myself to think it through calmly, trying to understand what this stellar alliance actually wanted. They were selecting the strongest civilization. Each city represented one civilization, and whichever one achieved internal unity first could hold a full vote to lift the safe zone and advance onto the Pangu continent. Of course, a civilization could also just hide in the safe zone forever, but the cost was that every other civilization would get 100 years of development for every 1 year spent hiding. If I stayed in the safe zone for just 1 year while everyone else got 100, that was basically self-inflicted extinction. But then it hit me. What did any of this have to do with me? Was I seriously supposed to be my own one-man civilization? Right then, the so-called continent of Pangu slowly materialized in the void of space before me. This landmass was massive, like an endless extension of Earth itself. I suddenly realized I was only tens of thousands of meters above the ground, and my heart leapt with a wild thought. Maybe, just maybe, I could still be saved. I stuck a finger out of my pocket dimension, and gravity immediately took hold, sending the soap bubble space into a slow free fall. I don't know how long it took, but then, with a soft thud, my feet touched solid ground, and God, did that feel good. This continent of Pangu was clearly not normal. The trees around me stood 300 to 500 meters tall. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the roar of a wild beast, and panic set in immediately. How was I supposed to survive out here? I didn't even have a pocket knife on me, just my phone. Then that cold voice returned. "Generating civilization milestone system. Warning, an overlooked civilization branch has been detected. Race, human. Adding human civilization. Branch 18. Current population, 1. Civilization code, 7812HSKKG18. Please remember your civilization code." Huh? Congratulations, your civilization has been awarded a unique milestone. Ninth era's first pioneer, condition met. It took me half a day to process it. I was the very first among all civilizations to leave the safe zone. I couldn't help but laugh at the dark humor of it all. The Stellar Alliance was actually treating me, one guy, as an entire civilization. It was ridiculous. Realistically, humanity would need at least 10 years of internal struggle before reaching any kind of consensus, and lifting the safe zone within 20 years would already count as a miracle. Meanwhile, 1 year in the safe zone equaled a century out here, which meant by their timeline I was already dead. But then the cold voice spoke again. "Your civilization has received a milestone reward, Pioneer's Eye. This ability reveals information about most objects. Reward will be randomly assigned to one member and is being transmitted now." I thought to myself, there's only one person in branch 18, me, so what exactly is there to randomize? In an instant, a beam of light struck my right eye. I woke up drenched in sweat to discover I now had a new ability ability called the Pioneer's Eye. Almost on reflex, I glanced down at the ground and information flooded in about a plain-looking weed. Non-toxic, but given my digestive system, eating it would just give me a nasty bout of constipation, though I could try it if I wanted the experience. The same unremarkable weed had roots rich in polysaccharides that could be boiled into a drink for a bit of energy, and it had detoxifying and anti-inflammatory properties too. The sheer volume of information pouring through my right eye was almost dizzying. I glanced at my own right hand next, and the eye told me this was the hand of an unremarkable person, with a mild case of tendinitis from years of overuse. I had to admit, this ability was seriously powerful. Did that mean I actually had a shot at surviving? I set my jaw with determination. If I could just gather enough milestones, I could build myself up into a superhuman piece by piece, then trek my way back to the safe zone and lead humanity to its peak. But the very next second, a python thick as a water barrel came charging out of the river at me. This snake had some real strength to it, and it looked like it wanted to turn me into fertilizer. There was no way I could take it on in my current state. My pupils shrank in pure terror, and in that split second, do or die moment, I activated my ability, Pocket Dimension. Splash! The python lunged and hit nothing but empty air, utterly confused about how its plump meal had just vanished into thin air. It hung around for over an hour before finally swaggering off, and only then did I release the Pocket Dimension. My clothes were completely soaked through with sweat. Thank God I hadn't been holding a rabbit or something, or I'd have been done for. I picked up a brown snake scale off the ground, palm-sized and hard as iron, which looked like it could make a decent weapon. After a good bit of effort, I fashioned it into a simple hatchet. The Pioneer's Eye chimed in with a note. Crafting a tool that resembled a hatchet meant its user had officially entered the Stone Age. I crept carefully down to the riverbank to check the water, and it turned out to be completely ordinary spring water, with a low chance of getting sick from drinking it raw, though it was safer to boil it first. I cupped some in my hands and drank, and there was something purely, naturally sweet about it. In my head, I was practically shouting, "Stellar Alliance, give me a milestone already. I'm the first person to ever drink from the rivers of Pangu." Sadly, no reward voice came this time. I stared miserably at my reflection in the river, seeing a defeated-looking guy radiating pure aimlessness, and couldn't help but laugh at my own ridiculous complaining. Better focus on surviving the night first. I gathered some dry branches and pulled a few edible wild vegetables from the ground. The forest was crawling with insects too, plenty of them edible, packed with protein, and apparently tasting like chicken once roasted. I kept moving forward, and suddenly a faint light caught my eye in the distance. What was that? I held my breath, gripping my snake scale hatchet, and crept forward several dozen meters to investigate. On a pile of rocks sat a decrepit, rusted-out van, its tires long gone. How could there possibly be a car out here? The Pioneer's Eye suspected it was a relic left behind by some civilization from the 8th era. My own civilization was thriving so fast that I'd already stumbled onto a genuine historical ruin, except my civilization was just me, one guy, so thriving felt like a stretch. I peered inside the vehicle and spotted a shattered skeleton, roughly 4'7", clearly not human. My instinct screamed at me to get away, but I needed that van to survive the first night. Steeling myself, I buried the bones in a small depression nearby and offered a quick prayer of respect. The moment I climbed into the van, that same cold voice spoke again. "The human civilization under your charge has discovered a relic from the 8th era. Congratulations, you have earned a unique milestone, 9th era's first explorer. Milestone reward, Explorer's Eye, which grants insight into civilization relics and any treasures that may lie within. Reward will be randomly assigned to one member and is being transmitted now." A beam of white light struck my left eye with perfect precision, and by the time I regained consciousness, it was already evening. These unique milestones were apparently way too easy to trigger, and every single one knocked me out cold. At least I'd been sitting inside the van when it happened, because getting picked at by wild animals while unconscious would not have been fun. Now both of my eyes had basically become titanium dog eyes. When I activated the Explorer's Eye, a burst of colorful light halos flooded my vision. Red marked danger, green marked civilization ruins, and gold marked treasure. What stunned me was that the entire ground around me was glowing green, meaning an entire buried city-level ruin lay beneath my feet, with occasional flickers of gold and red scattered throughout. This broken-down van I was sitting in was just the tiniest fraction of the whole ruin. I felt a rush of excitement for a second before deflating completely. What did any of this matter to me? Was I supposed to dig out an entire buried city with my bare hands? If someone put a steaming bowl of beef ramen in front of me right now, I'd choose that over any treasure without hesitation, and just thinking about it made my mouth water. No, stop thinking about food, I told myself, dragging my exhausted body up to start a fire. Water, fire, shelter, food, the 4 pillars of survival, and I couldn't afford to skip any of them. Rubbing sticks together for fire sounded like way too much effort, so I ended up sacrificing my phone for the cause. With a soft whoosh, a flame representing civilization civilization itself sprang to life. I found a scrap of sheet metal in the van and bent and hammered it into a rough container. I walked to the river, gathered some water along with roots and wild vegetables, and boiled them together in the metal sheet. It didn't taste great, carrying an odd, indescribable bitterness. As the sun set, I sat alone in the forest, and loneliness crept over me slowly. Good night to me, I thought, for today at least. When I woke up, the sun was already rising in the east, and I slapped a mosquito dead mid-bite on my arm. Wait, so this wasn't a dream after all? Grumbling to myself, I wandered slowly along the valley and found an empty metal soda can, no leaks, good enough to use as a cup. I also found another car, this one completely wrecked, which was a shame. I spotted a dangerous creature nearby, something that looked like a leopard, letting out a low, threatening growl. I chucked the soda can straight at it, and to my shock, the leopard bolted in fright and disappeared in a flash. Come back here, I thought. I was hoping for meat tonight. Truthfully, I'd been terrified, half planning to hide in my pocket dimension like a coward, but it turned out I'd scared the thing off by accident. Further along, I came across a massive carnivorous plant, its branches and leaves sprawling over 1,000 meters, with a trunk that stood a full 100 meters tall. This flower carried some kind of extraordinary power, and its fruit was supposedly packed with nutrients the human body needed, but I was nowhere near strong enough to challenge it. Getting too close would mean becoming its next meal. No wonder this whole area was glowing gold and red. So this was the source, an enormous man-eating flower with fruit the size of soccer balls. The smell alone was incredible. I silently begged, "Dear Stellar Alliance, if you could just make one fruit fall down, I'd bow to you a few times in gratitude." I waited for what felt like forever, but no fruit ever dropped. How stingy, I thought, not even willing to give me that much. Instead, I found 42 small red wild berries, about the size of peanuts. The pioneer's eye noted that these were mildly nutritious but utterly unremarkable fruits, non-toxic, though nobody in their right mind would actually choose to eat them. Nobody would eat them? Well, I would. I was starving enough that taste had stopped mattering entirely. The sun was already climbing high, and if I didn't find something better soon, I'd be back to eating roots and bugs again. Deep in a canyon, I stumbled across a massive stretch of collapsed buildings, flickering with green and gold light. I'd found actual city ruins. I dug into the ground on a whim and immediately pulled out a gold necklace, easily worth half a pound of gold by weight. I figured I'd come back for more later, since carrying an extra pound right now just wasn't practical. These ruins had clearly been buried for centuries, since even vacuum-sealed canned goods inside had rotted away completely. After wandering around for a while, I picked out the largest, most intact building I could find. It felt like some kind of shelter, and I hoped there might actually be food inside. There was a heavy mechanical door that could still be opened even without power, and the passcode turned out to be 20260606. Seriously, was this eye actually this incredible? I punched in the code, and with a loud click, the massive metal door swung open. A wave of stale, decayed air hit me, and then a black blur shot straight at my head like a bolt of lightning. Oh my god. I instantly activated my pocket dimension. Once inside, I got a clear look at it. A spider the size of a basketball, roughly 2.5 years old. I thought to myself, you really think you can mess with me? Spiders were basically bugs too, and big ones meant more meat. Starving and desperate, I burst out of my pocket dimension and swung my snake scale hatchet down with everything I had. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. The spider collapsed to the ground and stopped moving entirely. I stood there panting heavily, checking it over and hoping it wasn't poisonous. After removing the shell and organs, there was easily 5 pounds of meat left. Was this really a spider? This looked more like a chicken drumstick. And then, right on cue, the dark humor struck again. Your human civilization is the first to kill a superior transcendent life form, the abyssal demon spider. Congratulations, you have earned a unique milestone, 9th Era's First Hunter. Milestone reward, storage space. This creates a personal storage dimension where time flow is nearly frozen, perfectly preserving your spoils. Reward is being transmitted now. What in the world? This spider counted as a superior transcendent life form? It probably needed another century or so of growth before it actually deserved that title. This was clearly just me being an unscrupulous ambush predator, since I'd barged into the ruin and killed it the very next day after it hatched. Come on, give me an actual combat ability for once, I thought. Another familiar beam of light struck my mind, and it took me a full 2 hours to recover from it that time. This new storage space, unlike my pocket dimension, couldn't hold anything with consciousness, but at my current strength, it could hold roughly 1 cubic meter of space. Not bad at all. I picked up the spider and stepped inside to store it, only to realize this place was actually some kind of data center. The room was packed wall to wall with what looked like supercomputer mainframes. Deeper in, I found an archive room on the lowest level, filled with acid-free paper documents. The pioneer's eye noted it was currently decoding this civilization's written language, which would take some time. Further ahead, a row of thick glass doors blocked my path. I knocked on one, and it felt solid and heavy. "Hello? Anyone in there?" There were no survivors. Still, this data center seemed like a solid place to hole up, safer than sleeping exposed out in the wild. I comforted myself with that thought and headed back to my old campsite to retrieve my fire. By the time I made the round trip, it was already afternoon. First things first, time for a spider barbecue feast. The pioneer's eye chimed back in with more commentary, pointing out that this abyssal demon spider, barely a day old, had been cut down through nothing but an unscrupulous sneak attack. And given a few years to actually mature, it might have produced an excellent transcendent bloodline. Aside from the venom glands and internal organs, every other part was safe to eat. The eye-shaped pattern on its back apparently carried a subtle, mentally intimidating effect. I examined it closely and figured the small sac glowing with red light had to be the venom gland. I carefully sealed it away inside a metal tin. The abyssal demon spider's venom gland reportedly contained an incredibly potent neurotoxin, something I definitely wasn't capable of resisting. Good find, though. I snapped off a few of the spider's long legs and started cooking them up. A sizzling sound filled the air, mixing a strange smell with the rich scent of roasting meat. I steeled myself and took a bite, and wait, why did this taste exactly like beef? Instantly, a warm current surged through my stomach. Apparently, transcendent life forms carried incredibly dense energy, since a single spider could sustain me for at least 3 days. This was amazing. Stellar Alliance, I thought, since I actually got to eat well today, I'll hold off on cursing you out for now. And hey, if you could throw in a gorgeous wife on top of that, I'd become your #1 devoted fan. Since I was already making demands, I figured I might as well go all in. That wife better be a goddess who'd descended from the heavens, with limitless combat power, and completely, hopelessly in love with me. Right on cue, thunder rumbled and dark clouds swallowed the sky, and a golden bolt of lightning split a massive tree clean in half. Rain came pouring down in an instant, and I felt an overwhelming sense of relief that I'd already found shelter from the storm. In the dim glow of the firelight, I sat there planning out my next steps. The venom gland could be turned into poison, so I needed to preserve it carefully. The hooks on the spider's legs could work as toothpicks or even as needles for sewing clothes. As for the guts, those would make perfect fish bait. Suddenly, that cold notification voice rang out again. All biological attribute systems activated. With data observation ability unlocked, higher tier beings can now view the attributes of lower tier beings. An unremarkable fish, having just eaten its fill, was currently displaying itself through my Pioneer's Eye, level 4.5.2, Transcendent rank 1. Then it listed my own innate abilities: Pocket Dimension, Pioneer's Eye, Explorer's Eye, Storage Space. Evaluation: an utterly mediocre dead man. It noted that I hadn't even set foot on the path of transcendence, yet somehow possessed 4 innate abilities, which was practically unheard of. I rubbed my temples and thought to myself, my current strength is honestly pathetic. At least I had an entire civilization ruin sitting beneath my feet. Might as well get some sleep first. The next morning, I ate a spider leg for breakfast and got back to my new life of scavenging junk across the wilderness. Before long, following a faint golden glow, I found a storage bin about 1 cubic meter in size, a genuinely useful container. I also picked up a 10-meter length of vine, incredibly sturdy, perfect for use as rope. Not bad at all. Then I found a hatchet weighing a good 20 pounds. Even rusted, its cutting power still outclassed my snake scale hatchet, making it at least SR tier as far as weapons went. Inside a collapsed building, I found a toolbox too, and after some sharpening, things like the scissors inside were still perfectly usable. Then I ran into a venom-eyed wild wolf, snarling and baring its teeth right at me. But my Pioneer's Eye quickly picked up on something. This was a Pangu gray wolf, an extremely common wild animal in the region. It was an old wolf, cast out from its pack due to old age, and between disease and starvation, it likely had only days left to live. Its stats read: Physique 4.2, Vitality 6.8, Spirit 1.2, Transcendent rank 0, Combat ability 5. I thought to myself, you're not seriously thinking about eating me, are you? I swallowed hard and stepped forward with my hatchet raised. Its 3 core stats really weren't anything special. I could just cave its skull in with one swing. The wolf let out a whimper, and despite its size, it was actually trembling. It was afraid of dying. For some reason, a flicker of pity stirred in my chest. After a moment of hesitation, I tossed some spider guts toward it. I told it, the flesh and blood of a transcendent creature should be more than enough to fill your belly, but come at me again and I won't be so generous next time. Honestly, part of me really did want to eat you, you know that? Then it wandered off. I made my way to the riverbank and turned the storage bin I'd found into a makeshift fish trap, loading it with spider guts and sinking it underwater with vine rope. I hoped for a good haul the next day. That marked my 3rd day here, and life had become so full that I barely had time to dwell on anything troubling. I drifted off into a heavy sleep. A new day began. I grabbed my hatchet and headed to the river while it was still barely light out. If the fish trap turned out to be a success, it would solve my food problem once and for all. Along the way, I kept up my usual scavenging routine, picking up soda cans, bottles, a broken piece of semiconductor equipment, and even a backpack, stuffing everything into my storage space. Then, incredibly, my luck exploded. A faint golden glimmer caught my eye in the grass. What was this? Inside a metal box sat a brown glass bottle containing dozens of small red pills. My pioneer's eye immediately supplied information, a medicine containing trace amounts of transcendent elements, capable of boosting the immune system and treating most bacterial infections. Even though it was long expired, the packaging was airtight and well preserved, so it might still be effective. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Jackpot. This was easily SSR tier treasure. Maybe feeding that wolf yesterday had been a genuine good deed, and now my luck was paying off big time. Double the fortune today. I headed to the fish trap by the river. Splash, splash. The large bin was shaking slightly, meaning there were definitely fish inside. I just didn't know how many. I carefully scanned my surroundings, not wanting to end up as someone else's lunch by the water's edge. And sure enough, there he was. Old wolf, were you seriously hiding in the grass planning to ambush me? What an ungrateful mutt. The old wolf seemed to realize it had been spotted and slowly emerged from the grass, wagging its filthy, matted tail. It didn't seem hostile at all, so I went ahead and opened up the fish trap. And wow, over a dozen fish of various sizes were flopping around inside, alive and kicking, the biggest one weighing 5 or 6 pounds. My mood instantly brightened, and I casually grabbed one fish and tossed it to the old wolf, who was still wagging away. I stored the rest of the fish in my storage space, then gutted one of the bigger fish and put the innards back into the trap for next time. Hopefully tomorrow would be another great haul. A true angler never comes home empty-handed. I turned around to see the filthy old wolf wagging its tail at me yet again. I thought, do you have no dignity left at all? In my head, I couldn't help but rate him. A bit dim-witted, but with a certain crafty streak, desperately clinging to survival. This guy actually managed to make me laugh. I told him, I've got a bottle of these little red pills here, not sure if they even work. I'll use you as my test subject first. If you die, don't blame me, and if you survive, consider yourself lucky. I pulled one out and mixed it into some fish guts. The old wolf looked like a starving ghost reborn, wolfing it down in 2 bites without hesitation. Once he finished, I got ready to head back and prepare all these fish. The old wolf kept a cautious distance, following along behind me at an unhurried pace. I thought it over and decided not to chase him away. I'd been talking to myself for 2 straight days now, and it was getting lonely. What could possibly cure this loneliness? A woman, obviously. Back at my shelter, I got the fire going and started roasting fish. The old wolf lingered outside the entrance, too nervous to come in. Whatever, I thought. If you want to be my dog, I'll give you that chance. The fish turned out genuinely delicious, packed with rich, wild flavor, just missing a bit of seasoning. Tomorrow, I'd head back to the ruins and look for salt. A place this massive surely had some somewhere. Once I finished eating, I scraped the leftover scraps into a beat-up container and brought it over to the old wolf, who was drooling non-stop. He tried a cautious lick first. Then, as if realizing wolves were actually allowed to eat this, he devoured the entire thing in a frenzy. I reached out slowly and carefully, muttering under my breath, "Don't bite me, because if you do, you're getting turned into stew." In the end, I successfully got to pet that furry head. It smelled a little rank, sure. The old wolf's venom-colored eyes widened in surprise, clearly enjoying the sensation of being petted. From then on, he leaned into it more and more, gradually turning more and more dog-like by the day. Why isn't there a milestone for domesticating animals, I wondered? Watching the old wolf roll around on the ground, its transcendent rank still reading 0, I suddenly understood. Taming a transcendent life form was probably what actually triggered a milestone. The next day, I couldn't stand the old wolf's stench any longer, and forcibly dragged him down to the river for a bath. Clothes make the man, fur makes the wolf, I guess. I could tell his overall condition was rapidly improving. Maybe those little red pills really were working, because this aging Pangu gray wolf had genuinely bonded with me. Under my careful care, he might just live a few more years yet. Woof, woof, woof! Suddenly, he started barking wildly and bolted away like a madman. I looked closer and spotted a nearly 10-meter-long giant crocodile quietly approaching, its stats highlighting that same ungrateful wolf trait I'd noted before. Thankfully, getting an early warning like that helped me out enormously. An hour later, once the crocodile finally left, I emerged from my pocket dimension and found the old wolf sitting smugly in the grass. Nice teamwork there, buddy. With the old wolf leading the way, after about a week of casual scouting, I'd roughly mapped out the territorial layout within a 50-kilometer radius. The undisputed strongest boss-tier creature was that giant man-eating flower, sitting at the very top of the local food chain. Whenever I tried scanning its stats, all I got was a string of question marks. Within those tens of kilometers also lurked 5 lesser boss-tier threats: a king serpent, a heavenly scorpion, a fish-headed monster, a fire salamander, and a venomous wasp queen. I couldn't help but sigh. Here I was, having killed the single most promising creature in the entire region, the abyssal demon spider, yet I was still getting pushed around by these small fry monsters. Life at the bottom of this food chain really wasn't easy. Still, I hadn't forgotten my core mission that week, and I diligently scavenged plenty of junk along the way. The first major find was a huge field of what looked like potatoes and pumpkins. These plant tubers and fruits were packed with carbohydrates, making them an excellent staple food source. I also found something like a breadfruit tree, its fruit practically pre-made flour. My long-term food supply problem was basically solved now. Sometimes I'd stand atop the tall ruins and imagine where I might end up 100 years from now. Even with the old wolf's company, I found myself growing lonelier by the day. Eventually, I threw myself into training obsessively. It was just too lonely out here. Ever since finding a stable food source, my thoughts had actually grown more complicated, not less. The only cure for this loneliness, I figured, was to train myself into a superhuman. A week later, my superhuman training plan came to a screeching halt thanks to knee pain. Then I heard a sudden howl and stepped outside to find something utterly jaw-dropping. The old wolf had somehow gone and found himself a female wolf. Who in the world is this, I thought? Is this your girlfriend? I crouched down to get a better look, and yeah, it really was a female wolf, and a pretty good-looking one at that. I told her, "Come here, let me give you a few pats." Right then, a notification chimed. The Great Pioneer's Eye has successfully decoded the Meda civilization's written language. You may now read their archival records. My heart skipped a beat, and I jogged straight into the data center to start reading through those acid-free paper files. The first document was a government work report. After the Meda civilization's Dog-Ear City reached the safe zone, resources had grown scarce, and many supplies couldn't be replenished. The next paper asked, "When will we finally be able to lift the safe zone? Our Meda civilization has now been in the safe zone for 50 years. Outside, 5,000 years have already passed." The next entry read, "Our Meda civilization has now spent a full 70 years in the safe zone. The outside world has transformed completely by now." By the time I reached the 300-year mark in the records, the Meda civilization still hadn't advanced onto the Pangu Continent. Outside, 30,000 years had gone by. As time passed, the Pangu Continent was apparently getting worse and worse, racked with increasingly terrifying disasters. The records mentioned observing the fall of a sky city, meaning even a supposedly super advanced civilization out there could eventually meet its end. The safe zone itself remained untouched by these disasters. So what kind of ending awaited us all? I took a deep breath. Would the Stellar Alliance really let a civilization that just sat around doing nothing survive indefinitely? I realized worrying about that right now was pointless. I'd only been on the Pangu continent for about 15 days, which back in the safe zone amounted to a mere 3.6 hours. Better to just focus on living my own life properly. Next, I found another genuinely useful article. It read, "What exactly do the three attributes, physique, vitality, and spirit, actually represent?" According to statistics, within the Meda civilization, the probability of awakening an innate superpower was about 1 in 10, while the probability of awakening an observation-type ability was roughly 1 in 100,000. My Pioneer's Eye, 1 in 100,000. This ability really was incredibly powerful. No wonder it called itself great. Anyway, back to the article. It argued that physique represented physical body and raw strength, vitality represented one's perceptive awareness of the external world, and spirit was the most complex of the three. Essentially, in the simplest terms, the soul itself. No wonder the old wolf's danger-sensing instincts were sharper than mine. That actually made a lot of sense. The old wolf, having eaten his fill, came bounding over to play. I waved him off, telling him I was busy with important matters. I was too absorbed in my reading to pay him any attention. Meanwhile, the Meda civilization's sixth branch, after 300 years of development within the safe zone, had an army whose strongest members had reached Transcendent Rank 3, with their physique, vitality, and spirit stats hovering around 18 points each. I had no real reference for how strong Rank 3 actually was, but I understood one thing clearly. I needed to get onto the path of transcendence as fast as possible. Right now was the most precious window of opportunity, the early pioneering phase. Whether it was unique milestones, transcendent creatures that hadn't yet fully matured, or all sorts of genius treasures scattered across the land, all of it was still there for the taking, relatively easy to claim. Another week passed, and I threw myself into anxious, relentless study, transforming into a model student poring over every document in this place. I hadn't studied this hard even for my college entrance exams back home. The difference was the old wolf, my resident slacker, kept switching girlfriends practically every day. One good-looking female wolf after another showed up for a free meal, and then decided to just stick around and never leave. That day, the old wolf dragged in a wild pheasant, and I quickly and efficiently drained its blood, cooking up a rustic beggar's chicken. It smelled absolutely amazing. It had been way too long since I'd had proper roasted chicken. That same day, I finally found exactly what I'd been searching for: the origin of transcendence. It stated that Dog-Ear City currently had roughly 1.05 million naturally awakened individuals, but only a small fraction of them could actually cultivate further. Everyone else needed a transcendent spark to continue advancing. Unfortunately, they'd discovered this fact far too late. A transcendent spark. My heart sank instantly. I don't have one of those either, I thought. I kept reading. Apparently, transcendent sparks could also appear within wild monsters, but only in creatures of exceptional strength and power. I sat there stunned for a long moment. What a shame that the abyssal demon spider had been far far too young to have developed a transcendent spark yet. If I somehow got a second chance, well, I'd probably still have killed it anyway. Now I needed to hunt down a monster carrying a transcendent spark if I wanted to keep cultivating using its power. The area's big boss, the man-eating flower, was completely out of the question. That thing was simply too strong. After careful consideration, I set my sights on the fire salamander. This monster lived alone, meaning I wouldn't have to deal with a whole crew of underlings backing it up. Even the king of hell finds troublesome little demons a headache, as the saying goes. Still, taking on a transcendent monster with nothing but a mortal body was genuinely no small challenge. Even if I found guns and ammunition somewhere, after all these years, they'd be completely useless by now. The best approach, naturally, was a trap. I built one big enough to swallow an elephant whole, sharpening rebar scavenged from the ruins into spikes and driving them into the ground. Then I retrieved the spider venom gland I'd been carefully saving, venom from a high-tier guardian creature, the abyssal demon spider itself. I hoped it would be enough to kill outright. 2 months of preparation slipped by quietly. I'd been here 100 days now. I felt like I was finally settling into life in this place. Humanity, I wondered, what exactly happens in a single one of your days? Great Stellar Alliance, please watch over me. If I lost today, I'd end up as nothing more than a pile of salamander droppings. I strapped on a backpack loaded with weapons and dragged along a 50-pound fish I'd caught, heading off toward the distance. After walking for a little over 2 hours, I arrived at the canyon where the fire salamander made its home. The old wolf and his harem of female wolves refused to go any further, their fur standing on end. That was the crushing, absolute pressure of a superior being bearing down on inferior ones. I tossed the fish out upwind, knowing it would definitely catch the scent. I also knew the spider venom alone probably wouldn't kill it outright. Let's have ourselves a proper battle of dragon versus tiger, I thought. The fire salamander seemed to be asleep. I waited over an hour before it finally crawled slowly out of its cave. I could hardly believe I was actually about to fight something like this, and completely one-on-one at that. The salamander, lacking any real intelligence, lunged forward and swallowed the fish whole without hesitation, then waddled back into its cave. As I waited, a different worry crept into my mind. Was it already dead? Because if a creature carrying a transcendent spark died, that spark would gradually dissipate over time. Then suddenly, an earth-shaking roar tore through the air. That multi-ton behemoth was thrashing wildly inside its cave. My heart immediately started pounding, my pupils contracting in tension. My pioneer's eye fed me information. A powerful reptilian transcendent life form, apparently afflicted by some potent toxin, though clearly the poison alone wasn't going to kill it. Was I really about to challenge this thing? It might vanish from this world entirely by tomorrow. I have no choice but to fight it now, I told myself. My fighting spirit was fading more each day, and I needed to reclaim the courage that belonged to humanity. I let out a furious roar toward the mouth of the cave. Come on then, come devour your dear old grandfather. The fire salamander, already writhing in agony from the poison in its gut, exploded with rage and immediately redirected all its fury straight at me. It moved with each stride covering a dozen meters or more, radiating pure, killing intent and violence. Every hair on my body stood straight up instantly. So I guess I really was still afraid of death after all. I let out a nervous laugh and spun around, breaking into the fastest sprint of my entire life. But there was no way my speed could match the fire salamander's. I deliberately weaved along the rocky, snake-scale terrain to slow it down. Boom, 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 the rocks shattered like foam under the massive creature's charge from behind. In the distance, the old wolf's howling rang out. Seeing his master being hunted down, he was absolutely frantic with worry. The continuous full-speed running was starting to drain me completely. Was this it? Was this really where it ended? There was still some distance left before the trap. I was about to get smashed flat any second now. And that's when I heard a wolf's howl. It was the old wolf. He'd finally worked up the courage to charge in. The female wolves stayed back, howling wildly in what almost looked like a challenge. The old wolf was smart. He knew exactly where the trap was. So, with those old bones of his, he tried to cover the final stretch for me. I thought, don't you dare die on me. I'll hide myself first. My eyes stung a little at his kindness, and I immediately activated my pocket dimension. The fire salamander noticed the hateful little creature in front of it had vanished, and its rage naturally redirected onto the old wolf instead. The old wolf was terrified out of his mind, practically soiling himself the entire way there. Thankfully, the distance wasn't far, and he reached the edge of the trap almost immediately. The fire salamander came roaring in like a runaway dump truck. With one agonized howl, the old wolf got launched a dozen meters through the air, and then, with a tremendous crash, the fire salamander plunged straight into the trap. The massive boulders rigged above the pit came crashing down on top of it, battering it senseless. I thought, screw it, let's finish this. I immediately dropped my pocket dimension and charged forward with my rebar spear. My explorer's eye fed me a warning: an injured, poisoned reptilian transcendent life form. But be careful, it warned. Its vitality was still ferocious, and its wounds were already slowly starting to clot. In the next instant, staring down at the rebar spear gripped tight in my hands, I thought, life doesn't even last 30 years. It's all just a fleeting dream. Nothing that lives escapes death eventually. I leapt forward. Time to borrow your spark. I jumped straight onto the fire salamander's massive body and drove the spear toward its eye. It let out a deafening roar, thrashing in mindless rage. In the next instant, a massive fireball erupted skyward like a thermobaric explosion. It was the fire salamander's signature ability, Flame Breath. The searing inferno melted the surrounding rock into molten lava. Flame Breath was the salamander's ultimate move, but it consumed enormous energy, and it wouldn't be able to keep it up for long. Thank God it missed me. That was way too close. Because I'd retreated into my pocket dimension the instant I saw it coming, I avoided most of the damage. Only my left arm got scorched by the burning fuel. Its left eye was already wounded, and the venom coating my spear was doing its work. Being so close to the brain, the poison spread through its system even faster. The enraged fire salamander burned through its entire fuel reserve in that single blast. Then I suddenly noticed its enormous body bearing down on top of me. It was going for a death roll, trying to crush me flat under its sheer body weight. Pocket dimension now. The beast's massive body passed directly through the space I'd just occupied, but my pocket dimension ability had its limits too. Activating it repeatedly in quick succession drained far more mental energy each time. Even so, I kept dodging back and forth like a coward, playing hit and run. I'd drop out of the pocket dimension, land a sneak attack, then vanish again. Eventually it stopped moving. It was exhausted. The fire salamander's prolonged, violent thrashing had let the spider venom spread deep into its nervous system, gradually draining the life out of that enormous body. But from using my pocket dimension so many times in a row, I'd hit my own limit too. I collapsed onto the ground, my vision starting to blur. My whole body burned with pain, and I honestly had no idea where all my injuries even were. Through the haze, I caught sight of the old wolf in the distance, dragging himself forward on his two front legs, crawling slowly out from the bushes. I thought, old buddy, if you're not dead yet, then I can't die either. Once we get back, I'm treating you to a real feast. I pulled out the last of my dried spider meat from my pocket and chewed on it slowly. By the time dawn broke, that enormous beast lay motionless on the ground, completely still. I burst out laughing, pure relief flooding through me. Even with absolutely no strength left in my body, I still raised both arms to greet the sunrise. Then, that familiar cold voice echoed in my ears once more. Congratulations, you have earned a unique milestone, Cross-Tier Slayer. You are the 9th era's first sentient being to solo kill a transcendent creature across a 5-rank power gap. Reward: Eternal Body. I was so utterly exhausted at that point that I could barely process the description of the reward. I simply staggered toward the fire salamander, drawn to the transcendent spark drifting free from its body. When I finally woke from unconsciousness, several of the female wolves were licking at my face with their tongues. They hadn't eaten their master after all. Good to know. I thought, so you all stayed here watching over me this whole time. Thank you, girls. The old wolf came limping over, whimpering, and I glanced over at him. Here was an elderly Pangu gray wolf with 2 broken ribs, having taken such brutal injuries for my sake. There was no way I'd just leave him to suffer. I checked him over carefully. Turned out his overall condition was actually decent. He wasn't going to die. I told him, I owe you my life, old buddy. Meanwhile, his harem of wives stared blankly at the fire salamander's corpse, then turned to look at me, their eyes filled with something close to reverence. A smile spread across my face right then, because I could already feel the transcendent spark pulsing inside my mind, along with the milestone reward, Eternal Body. I'd finally made it big. A transcendent spark didn't need much explanation. It was essentially a cultivatable power source. My 3 core stats could now break past normal human limits. As for the Eternal Body, that was even more powerful, dramatically extending my lifespan, granting minor limb regeneration, and preventing aging until my life truly reached its natural end. While I rested there, my explorer's eye caught sight of a rich golden glow deep inside the cave. Could the fire salamander's old den actually be hiding some kind of treasure? Meanwhile, back on the Pangu Continent's safe zone, only a single day had passed for the 17 human cities. But that had been more than enough time for society to fall into complete chaos. The internet went down, the power grid failed, even the water supply was cut off. Some people chose to barricade themselves at home, while others rushed out to loot supermarkets. Faced with disaster, everyone reacted differently. There were even young couples out there passionately confessing their love to each other in the middle of it all. Marriage registration offices suddenly found themselves swamped with lines of people waiting to register. The Yunhai city government announced it would fully protect its citizens' legal rights and crack down hard on all forms of crime, its message blaring from loudspeakers positioned throughout every corner of the city. It was a battle between the brightest and darkest sides of human nature. Many civilization branches abruptly collapsed entirely, spiraling into a kind of doomsday frenzy. Yunhai City sat tucked in a corner of the Pangu Continent, built along the shore of a massive lake. Reports kept flooding into the emergency meeting room. The power grid was still being restored, and the power plant's coal reserves would only last about 10 more days at current consumption, so everyone needed to conserve. With factories shut down, electricity demand had dropped significantly anyway. The grain reserves and major logistics centers had been successfully secured. With careful rationing, the food supply could sustain 10 million people for roughly a year. The most basic tier of network communication had just been restored. This particular emergency session was being called the Yunhai City Survival Conference. Yunhai City's top official, Lee Chun-hong, was buried in work, but still managed to carve out time to visit the Institute of Supernatural Research. Mr. Lee, they told her, this is the meteorite that fell from the sky. It's been sitting in our research center for a full 10 years now. Ever since that meteorite fell a decade ago, it had given rise to a huge number of people with superpowers, and governments around the world had all quietly chosen to cover up the truth. Zhang Huihui, the director in charge of the facility, cradled the spherical meteorite in his arms, roughly 2 meters in diameter and about 2 tons in mass. Its surface embedded with 20 screens, along with what looked like buttons. In total, over 300 of these meteorites had fallen from the sky, scattered across the entire world, yet only 17 cities had actually been transported through them. Zhang pressed a few of the buttons on the massive iron sphere, and to everyone's shock, a video call interface suddenly appeared. Human Civilization Branch 1 requesting communication with Human Civilization Branch 6. Beep. Connection established. Oh my god, Professor Zhang, good lord, you've all been transported here too? The face on the screen belonged to a renowned supernatural studies professor from another country, Mr. Edward. How are things on your end? Has chaos broken out there too? Edward shrugged helplessly. Everything here has completely fallen apart. Thank God we've got military protection, otherwise looters would already be storming through my own house. Standing off to the side, Lee Chun-hong nearly couldn't hold back a strange, inexplicable sense of relief. The best news she'd heard all day, oddly enough, was that her fellow humans elsewhere were in even worse shape than her own city. My friend, let's each just try to stay safe, Edward continued. The various cities were scattered more than 10,000 kilometers apart from one another. We can't really help each other directly, but we can at least share information, Professor Edward went on. Around the edges of every safe zone, and extending about 50,000 meters upward, there's a faint light barrier protecting us. Professor Zhang cut in. Let me add something. Actually, quite a lot of matter can pass through the safe zone barrier in molecular form, things like water, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and so on. And the time flow rate on the Pangu Continent runs 100 times faster than inside the safe zone. The light barrier will only disappear once the entire population votes to lift the safe zone. Mayor Lee Chun-hong nodded slowly, taking it all in. Can any of you share what kind of risks exist out there on the Pangu Continent? One by one, more civilization branches joined the discussion. Because of that 100-fold time differential, observing the outside world from within the safe zone felt like watching a movie on fast forward. We've observed plenty of ordinary plants and animals out there on the Pangu Continent, but we've also spotted a small number of transcendent species. We even captured footage of a massive cloud, dark enough to blot out the sky, with what looked like a black skull staring straight down at our safe zone. I want to ask, does any city have nuclear weapons on hand? Nobody answered that question. Do we have any? Lee Chun-hong asked quietly. A military officer responded, No ma'am, we only have some conventional weapons. If we manage to secure an oil field out on the Pangu Continent, could we actually refine it? Not with Yunhai City's current industrial capacity, no. Everyone, if any city out there does end up getting voted out of the safe zone by its population, please share whatever information you can with the rest of us. We'd like to know whether the roaming monsters out there are likely to attack. Right at that moment, one of the screens embedded in the spherical meteorite back at the Research Institute suddenly lit up on its own. A wall of information appeared across it. Civilization Assistance Management Device restarting, currently in the 9th era of the Pangu Continent. Scanning for displayable civilization milestones. 1. End the chaos and become a stable civilization. 2. Static crackled through the speaker. 3. Lift the safe zone and advance onto the Pangu Continent. Unknown interference detected, database corrupted, unable to complete scan. Everyone in the room stared, utterly baffled. What exactly was a civilization milestone? Had all 8 previous eras already gone extinct? Unfortunately, I don't know either, Zhang said, but this panel does seem to have some auxiliary functions we could look into. Currently scanning Human Civilization Branch 1, Yunhai City. Total population, 10,891,271. Number of naturally awakened individuals, 846,300. Number of transcendent sparks, 3. Prosperity level, 132. Technology level, unknown. Percentage of votes in favor of lifting the safe zone, 9.78%. Civilization rank, 1. Every official in that room felt a chill crawl up their scalp. Nearly 10% of Yunhai City's population had apparently already secretly cast their votes to leave. Well, nothing to see here, we'll be heading out now, someone joked nervously. Just as everyone was preparing to adjourn the meeting, they discovered that an 8th era civilization, the Meda civilization, was requesting contact with the human civilization, an 8th era civilization. Professor Zhang's face went slack with shock and confusion. Aliens. An actual alien civilization was reaching out to contact them. And then something even stranger happened. The face of a human man appeared on the screen. The man was muttering to himself. What in the world is this thing? Some kind of civilization assistance device? Can it actually contact humans? Hello? Contact humans. Connect me. Come on. Hurry up. The man appeared to be inside some dim underground bunker. Why won't the screen light up? Ugh, God, that reeks. That filthy fire salamander went and took a crap right in here. What kind of hygiene is that? Professor Zhang's eyes practically bulged out of his head. Who on earth was this guy? A citizen of the Meda civilization, yet somehow speaking their own language? Li Chunhong felt her blood pressure spike. Professor Zhang, is someone playing a prank on us? Did someone hack this thing? Professor Zhang was sweating bullets. Let me double check. But this is an alien artifact. Is it really possible for someone to have hacked it? Meanwhile, the man on screen kept talking to himself. Screen's still not lighting up, huh? And here I thought this was some amazing treasure. Turns out it's just junk. Wait, is this thing displaying the time? Well, that's at least somewhat useful. At least I won't have to keep track of the date manually anymore. Shortly after, the man dug up a fiery red crystal from the ground. This fire salamander really was loaded. There really was treasure here after all. Ha! I've really made it big this time. With this thing, I can cultivate my transcendent spark even faster now. Li Chunhong popped a blood pressure pill. Don't tell anyone about this yet. Keep it under strict confidentiality. Professor Zhang, can you try communicating with him? I'm trying right now. Hello? Sir? Citizen of the Meda civilization? Can you hear me? Zhang called out repeatedly, and eventually landed on a possible explanation. Maybe the screen on his end was simply broken, which was why he kept talking to himself without any response. Meanwhile, the man on screen was pushing the massive iron sphere around, muttering. Seems like this thing really can only send messages, no receiving function at all. Whatever, it runs on solar power anyway. I'll try again once it's fully charged. With a click, the screen went dark. No, wait, don't turn it off. We still need to observe him, Zhang shouted, his emotions getting the better of him before he could stop himself, leaving everyone else in the room exchanging bewildered glances. Meanwhile, somewhere in a cave on the Pangu Continent, I stood at the cave's entrance, frowning slightly. This place didn't look natural at all. I raised my hand and swept my pioneer's eye across the area. In the next instant, a golden glow surged up. Suspected Meda civilization air raid shelter, later occupied by a transcendent creature. I paused for a moment, then my eyes lit up. An air raid shelter. A civilization ruin. What was I waiting for? Time to loot it. I dragged my exhausted body forward and rushed inside. On the ground lay a scrapped, rusted metal door lying flat. I grabbed it and pulled, but it wouldn't budge an inch. Wow, this thing was tough. And heavy, too. I patted the door and made a mental note. I'll come back for this once I've got time to spare. Inside, over 100 bundles of foul-smelling fabric were piled up in a corner. I pinched my nose. Sure, it smelled awful, but a good wash and it could still be turned into clothing. Mosquito netting maybe, not the worst idea. Pressing further in, I suddenly stopped in my tracks. A burst of golden light exploded into view. The ground was absolutely covered in metal, gold, silver, all sorts of assorted ores, and especially gold bricks, piled up block after block like small mountains. I bent down and picked one up. Roughly 10 kilograms. Staring at the gold bricks covering the ground, my mouth twitched slightly. There had to be dozens of tons here. At Earth market prices, that would be worth tens of billions. I stood there in silence for a couple of seconds, then let out a cold laugh. If only any of this actually had any use out here. You couldn't buy medicine with it, couldn't buy food with it, couldn't even buy your life back with it. But damn, it still felt good. It really did feel amazing. I gave one of the gold bricks a light kick with my foot. Whatever, I'll just leave it here for now. Once I actually build myself a civilization someday, all of this becomes the national treasury. My pioneer's eye kept scanning. Fluorite, capable of extracting fluorine elements. I raised an eyebrow. Could that make toothpaste maybe? Spirit glowstone? Releases energy when heated. And it glows too. No clue what this thing actually does. Whoever wants it can have it. I continued deeper into the cave. Soon enough, a massive iron sphere came into view, its surface embedded with rings of crystal screens. Clearly not some ordinary object. I reached out and pressed my hand against it. My pioneer's eye immediately flashed a notification. Suspected Advanced Civilization Assistance Management Device. Capable of detecting a civilization's human resource data and equipped with remote communication functionality. Due to prolonged handling by the fire salamander, some functions had been damaged. My eyes went wide instantly. Remote communication. I could actually reach other humans. I lunged straight at it. I started pressing buttons frantically. The indicator light flickered twice. A staticky buzz crackled through the speaker. Fighting to contain my excitement, I shouted straight at the massive iron sphere. "Hello, human civilization! Can anyone hear me? This is Chen Fan. Someone connect me to humanity, quick." After a moment's thought, I rapidly typed in a code number, 7812HSKKJ. Right, that should be it. 1 second. 10 seconds. A full minute passed. The screen still hadn't lit up. The excitement drained from my face bit by bit. I sank down and sat on the ground. Of course. No expectations, no disappointment. But a moment later, I stood back up. Wait, that's not right. Just because I couldn't reach anyone right now didn't mean I never would. This iron sphere was officially mine from now on. In the next moment, I followed the golden glow from my explorer's eye deeper into the cave, all the way to its farthest depths, where the golden light burned brightest. I hefted my hatchet and started digging straight into the ground. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. Bang! A fiery red crystal rolled free from the dirt, palm-sized, looking like a chunk of solidified flame. I reached out and grabbed it. A notification instantly popped up. Crimson Spirit Crystal, capable of absorbing, purifying, and slowly releasing spiritual energy, can nurture a transcendent spark and accelerate cultivation. Quality rating, must have. I stared at the crystal and a grin spread uncontrollably across my face. I knew it, I thought. A golden glow that intense had to be hiding something big. I lifted the crystal up to eye level. I'd barely ignited my transcendent spark, and already the universe was handing me cultivation resources. This Pangu Continent was actually being pretty considerate for once. I carefully stored the Crimson Spirit Crystal away. I scanned the area once more, but the golden glow was gone, meaning I'd cleaned the place out completely. I turned and headed back toward the cave entrance. In the distance, the fire salamander's remains lay sprawled across the ground, enormous and charred black, still giving off traces of residual heat. My pioneer's eye popped up a notification. Transcendent life form, fire salamander, deceased. Due to the effects of the neurotoxin, the corpse was already beginning to decompose. Within roughly a day, most of the flesh would lose its value entirely. My expression darkened. Time was short. I needed to act immediately. I grabbed my hatchet and rushed over. Scales, hide, meat, all of it needed to come with me. The old wolf lay nearby with his broken ribs, still forcing himself to stay awake and watch me work. I glanced over at him. "Don't strain yourself watching," I told him. "Old buddy, you're a hero today. There's no way you're dying on me." The old wolf let out a soft whimper. I kept harvesting materials. Soon enough, I dug out a pile of stone-like formations, fuel crystals, hardened remnants of the fire salamander's internal fuel reserves. When ignited, they could burn at temperatures up to 3,000 degrees Celsius, and despite being only peanut-sized, each one could burn for a full day. My eyes lit up. This stuff was genuinely useful, perfect for starting fires, smelting metal, crafting weapons, all of it. I packed over 300 fuel crystals into a plastic bucket. Then I found 4 scale plates and 4 leg bones worth of material, perfect for building bows and crossbow weapons down the line. Let's see who dares mess with my camp after this. Next, I cut open its back, and the meat underneath was completely clean, untouched by the venom. A massive slab of prime tenderloin came into view. I swallowed hard. Now this was some real quality meat. I sliced off a large chunk and tossed it straight to the old wolf first. "First cut goes to you," I told him. "We won this fight because of you. You earned it." The old wolf's eyes welled up instantly. He opened his mouth and clamped down on the meat, devouring it hungrily. I pointed at him and laughed. "As the #1 hero of this battle, I get 99% of the spoils. You're #2, so you get 1%. Don't complain, those are the rules." The old wolf obviously didn't understand a word of it, but his tail wagged anyway. The female wolves gathered around too, staring up at me expectantly. I cut off more meat for them. "There's plenty for everyone, don't worry, nobody's getting left out." The female wolves ate until their bellies were completely round. I cut off a couple pieces for myself too and ate them raw, straight, sashimi style. The taste was pretty average, even a little fishy. But the very next second, a warm surge exploded outward from my stomach. My whole body shuddered involuntarily. This was way stronger than spider meat, at least twice as potent. I clenched my fist. Transcendent creature meat really was the ultimate hard currency out here. After eating, I got right back to work. I didn't stop for the entire day. My hatchet chipped, my palms blistered raw, my shoulders ached like they were about to snap clean off. But I couldn't afford to stop because the corpse would keep rotting and wild animals would eventually come sniffing around. This was loot I'd paid for with my own blood. By evening, my storage space was completely packed full, and only then did I head home, thoroughly satisfied. Exhausted as I was, I couldn't stop grinning. We won, I thought. We actually survived this. The female wolves threw their heads back and howled. I joined in too, howling right along with them, the sound erupting across the wild mountains. I finally made it back to camp. The metal door swung open. The old wolf collapsed into the pile of dry grass in the corner, tail wagging nonstop. I let out a breath of relief. Good, still got enough energy left to wag that tail, so you're not dying today. The next second, my entire body just collapsed onto the ground. Thud. I lay there face down, completely motionless. My adrenaline was spent. My physical strength was completely drained. A few minutes later, I gritted my teeth and forced myself back up. No, I couldn't sleep like this. I was covered head to toe in fire salamander fluids. I dragged myself outside to wash up. A blast of cold water hit me. I shivered hard. After washing up and coming back inside, my forehead started burning up. My expression shifted instantly. Oh, come on, not now, not with everything else going on. I pointed toward the door and told the female wolves, who'd earned a few scraps of salamander meat, keep watch tonight. Call out if anything happens. The female wolves wagged their tails in response. I muttered under my breath, thank God I have you all. You can't talk and you're not exactly the sharpest tools in the shed, but when it counts, you're genuinely reliable. I sealed the metal door shut, swallowed one of the red pills, and collapsed onto my grass bed. Just one solid sleep, that's all I need. I closed my eyes and blacked out completely. That sleep swallowed me whole. It felt like sleeping from the dawn of creation straight through to the end of the world. When I finally woke up, the sun was already high in the sky outside. My first instinct was to check on the old wolf. He was still alive, breathing steadily. I let out a breath of relief. Good, you're okay. Then I touched my own forehead. Ouch. My throat ached and my whole body felt sore. I immediately diagnosed myself. Condition, seasonal flu early stage. I froze for a moment, then patted my chest in relief. Okay, just the flu, that's manageable. Then the next instant, I bolted upright. Wait a second, there's no hospital out here, no doctors, no fever medicine. My face went dark. Stuck out here in this godforsaken place, one bad turn and this flu could genuinely kill me. My stat panel popped open. Physique, vitality, spirit, transcendent rank. 1. Abilities. Pocket Dimension, Pioneer's Eye, Explorer's Eye, Storage Space, Transcendent Spark, Eternal Body. Evaluation. Unclear why this otherwise unremarkable human possesses 6 abilities. Regardless, still fundamentally a rookie. I let out a cold laugh. Big talk coming from a system that just admitted I've got more abilities than anyone else. Say what you want, quantity still counts for something. But this wasn't the time to argue with a voice in my head. I dug out the bottle of red pills and swallowed another one. It should boost my immune system at least somewhat, but it wouldn't be enough on its own. I closed my eyes and focused deep within my mind, where a small red flame flickered steadily. My transcendent spark, warm but faint. I immediately called on it, channeling its power along my respiratory tract, burning away the virus, nourishing my cells, saving myself. Time ticked by slowly. 1 hour, 2 hours. I suddenly snapped my eyes open, drenched in sweat, but the pounding headache had mostly faded. My breathing had evened out too. I sat there on the bed and laughed. Incredible. Genuinely incredible. In less than half a day, I'd already beaten back the flu. I clenched my fist tightly. No wonder only civilizations that had ignited their transcendent sparks ever dared to explore the Pangu Continent. Without something like this, a single illness could easily take a person down for good. Right after that, my attention shifted to my other new ability, Eternal Body. I raised my hand, studying my palm, then my forearm. A passive ability, one I couldn't activate manually. Fine, I thought, then it better actually be worth something. My Pioneer's Eye offered an explanation. Dramatically extends lifespan, grants limited limb regeneration, keeps all stats permanently at peak condition, and prevents aging until the very end of one's natural lifespan. I froze completely. No aging at all. Permanently at full capacity, forever. What was the single most frustrating thing about being human? Progress came slow, but decline came fast. Skip training for a day, and your hands and feet already feel rusty. Skip it for 2 days, and your whole condition starts sliding. But now, things were different for me. Once I built up my strength, I'd get to keep it indefinitely. I clenched my fist, my eyes practically blazing with intensity, which meant as long as I pushed myself hard enough, sooner or later I really could build myself into a superhuman. I stood up and rolled my shoulders. My body still felt a little weak, but I could feel myself gradually climbing back toward peak condition. I touched my own face, too. Did that mean my looks were locked in permanently as well? I was 24 right now. Decent looking enough, I figured. I checked my reflection in a scrap of metal. Not bad at all. Even if I lived to be 1,000 years old, I'd never end up looking like tree bark. The corner of my mouth curled up. This ability was seriously solid. But the very next second, a harsh reality crept back into my mind. This was the Pangu Continent, and it was just me out here. No women, no cities, not even a single person I could hold a normal conversation with. I glanced over at the old wolf lying by my bed. He lifted his head and looked back at me. I fell silent. He fell silent too. I sighed. Never mind. Explaining this to you wouldn't help anyway. The old wolf let out a soft whimper. Don't whimper at me, I told him. You don't understand the pain of being a grown man out here alone. I grumbled a bit more under my breath, venting my frustration into thin air. A moment later, I pulled my focus back to something more useful. The brain was part of the body too, right? So did that mean I'd also retain knowledge and skills longer, forget things more slowly? I narrowed my eyes. If that was actually true, then this ability wasn't just about survival anymore. It meant I could keep getting stronger indefinitely, without ever backsliding. I patted my chest. Not bad, Stellar Alliance. This one's actually a solid reward. Still, I thought, why do you keep giving me support-type abilities? Not a single offensive ability so far. I pointed up at the ceiling, my tone thick with indignation. I earned my transcendent spark myself through my own hard work. That one's got nothing to do with you. The old wolf looked at me again. I waved him off. Don't look at me like that. I'm just reasoning with the guy upstairs, even though he probably won't even listen. Over the following days, aside from eating, drinking water, and using the bathroom, all I did was rest. That fight with the fire salamander had been an incredible win, but it came at a brutal cost. My stamina was completely drained, my energy and blood reserves hollowed out, my body felt like it had been through an explosion. I'd wake up, eat a bit of fire salamander meat, channel my transcendent spark to gently nurse my body back to health, then go right back to sleep. The female wolves kept watch outside while the old wolf recovered indoors. I visited him every single day, holding meat right up to his mouth. Eat up, I told him, you're surviving this. You're going to be my top general from here on out. The old wolf ate the meat, and I nodded approvingly. Good. Still got that fighting spirit. During those recovery days, I didn't sit around completely idle either. I combed through the records left behind by the Meta civilization, focusing specifically on cultivation techniques since digging through their entire worldview and history wasn't particularly useful right now. I only cared about the essentials: how to grow stronger, how to survive. By the 7th day, I finally couldn't stand lying around anymore. I threw off my grass mat and sat upright. Starting today, I begin real cultivation. Listen up, everyone. I'm about to evolve. I sat cross-legged, focused my mind, and before long, that little flame flickered gently, almost as if responding to my presence. The Meta civilization's records had been crystal clear on this point. A transcendent spark's core function boiled down to just one thing: strengthening the 3 core attributes: physique, vitality, and spirit. Once the spark grew powerful enough, it could even release mental energy, evolving into all sorts of combat techniques. That's exactly why the Meta civilization called it a civilization's most fundamental power, not because it was necessarily the strongest ability out there, but because it could be passed down, letting an entire civilization grow stronger together. Reading that part, all I could do was shrug. Too bad, since Human Branch 18 currently consisted of exactly one person: me. Whether or not it could ever be shared widely really didn't concern me much right now. Better to focus on getting myself strong first. In that moment, I actually felt pretty good about things. Sure, I'd been dropped onto the Pangu Continent completely alone from the start, but at least fate hadn't tried to bury me either. I'd landed right near a civilization ruin, with junk to scavenge, a wolf to work with, a fire salamander to hunt down, and milestone rewards along the way. With that thought, I pulled out the Crimson Spirit Crystal. The moment it appeared, the spark in my mind flickered instantly. My eyes narrowed. Here we go. The energy inside the crystal flowed like an invisible current, seeping into my body and surging straight toward my mind. I nearly burst out laughing. Wasn't this basically just an energy crystal the Meta civilization had left lying around? Turns out even the wealthy elite's approach to cultivation was refreshingly straightforward. Without a Crimson Spirit Crystal like this, normal cultivation would have meant slowly grinding it out over time. The Meta civilization had apparently developed all sorts of advanced techniques too: stellar energy resonance methods, stellar energy guidance methods, all of it sounding impressively technical. But right now, I didn't need to painstakingly work through any of that. The Crimson Spirit Crystal was handing me the answer directly. Sure, technique mattered, but raw resources mattered a whole lot more. 2 hours later, I suddenly felt full. Not stomach full, spark full. I immediately stopped myself, since cultivation wasn't something you could be greedy about. The body needed time to properly absorb it too. I opened my eyes and checked my stat panel, and my eyes lit up instantly. All three core attributes had increased by 0.1 each. The Crimson Spirit Crystal's energy reserves were still plentiful, nowhere near depleted yet. My mouth curved into an uncontrollable grin because this wasn't just talk, my stats were genuinely climbing. I stood up and stretched my arms, and while the change wasn't dramatically obvious, I could feel it. My body felt steadier, my breathing came easier, my mind felt clearer too. I looked over at the old wolf. See that? I'm getting stronger again. The old wolf wagged his tail, and I nodded. Good. Glad you're impressed too. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, I crouched down and used a stick to mark the date in the dirt, stroke by stroke, tally marks covering the ground. What day was this again? Day 105? Or maybe 106? Time was starting to blur together. This wasn't a small problem. Living alone out in the wilderness, the scariest thing isn't hardship itself, it's losing track of time entirely. Today, tomorrow, the day after, they all start blending into one another. Left unchecked, a person's mind could genuinely start to unravel. No, I needed accurate time tracking. I couldn't afford to forget how old I even was anymore. That thought immediately brought the massive iron sphere to mind, the civilization management device. Even though part of it was broken, its built-in timekeeping function should still work fine. That settled it. No point thinking it over further when I could just go get it. I cleared out some storage space first, then gave instructions to the old wolf. Watch the place. Don't wander off. I'm heading out to retrieve the iron sphere. Try running off, and I'm docking your meat rations when I get back. The old wolf immediately dropped down obediently. Good. I strapped my hatchet to my back, grabbed my tools, and set off. I made my way back to the Fire Salamander's Canyon once more. The massive corpse that had once lain sprawled across the ground was now nothing but a bare skeleton, swarmed by flies. I stood there for a moment, just taking it in. Alive, you're king. Dead, you're just meat. The Pangu Continent really didn't show anyone any mercy. I headed straight into the cave, retrieved the iron sphere, and stored it away in my storage space. Clean, efficient work. Time to head back. On the way, I took the opportunity to scavenge for medical supplies along the route. Unfortunately, my luck was pretty average this time, not a single trace of medical equipment anywhere. Come on, Meta civilization, I thought. You're supposedly some advanced civilization, and you couldn't even leave behind a little medicine for me? Still, I couldn't head back completely empty-handed. Along the way, I gathered mushrooms, herbs, and a plant that looked suspiciously like chili peppers. My pioneer's eye scanned it. Fuzzy cap ghost scatter mushroom, most likely non-toxic, with a texture similar to chicken drumstick meat. I nodded. Chicken drumstick mushroom. Solid find. Then, salvia root, usable as medicine, known for promoting blood circulation and dispersing blood stasis. I immediately dug up the root. Might come in handy for the old wolf's recovery. Then the suspected chili pepper plant, non-toxic, roughly 4,000 Scoville units of heat. My eyes lit up. Excellent find. Finally some seasoning for stir-fried salamander meat. I packed everything away carefully and looked up toward camp in the distance. Once I got back, I'd try the metal sphere one more time, see if I could actually reach other humans. This attempt would decide everything. Meanwhile, back in the safe zone at Human Civilization Branch 1, Yunhai City's Institute of Supernatural Research, the atmosphere was tense, been forced to run much longer. Eventually, one of the researchers spoke up. First possibility, he genuinely is human. For whatever reason, he left the safe zone alone, and afterward, he discovered the Meta Civilization's assistance management device and used it to try contacting us. Another researcher immediately chimed in. Since the device is damaged, he probably has no idea he's actually reached us at all. The conference room fell silent again. Did that explanation actually hold up? It was plausible, sure, but the real problem was how utterly absurd the whole situation sounded. One person, completely completely alone, leaving the safe zone to survive out on the Pangu Continent. The time ratio between the outside world and the safe zone was 100 to 1. One day inside the safe zone equaled 100 days out there. Even an elite special forces operative might not survive comfortably out there. And this was the Pangu Continent, home to transcendent creatures, unknown pathogens, ancient ruins, and monsters. Someone spoke up quietly. What's the second possibility? Maybe civilizations out there just happen to look human too, and maybe their language happens to resemble Earth languages. Maybe we just happen to run into an alien civilization that coincidentally speaks Chinese. The odds were incredibly low, but it couldn't be entirely ruled out either. Yunhai City's top official, Li Chunhong, rubbed her temples. She'd already witnessed far too many absurd things in a single day. Supernatural technology, a civilization assistance device, a suspected human out in the wild. Each detail was more outrageous than the last. He knocked on the table. Conclusion: we keep every possible line of communication open. Any useful piece of information could improve humanity's odds of survival. Everyone nodded. Representatives from the other cities gradually voiced their agreement too. If new information comes in, we share it. The meeting wrapped up quickly. On the surface, everyone stayed cordial. But underneath, something had already shifted. Information was a resource now, and resources don't stay free forever. Once the call disconnected, Professor Zhang Hui strode quickly into a smaller meeting room, his expression heavy. Everyone, the facial recognition results are in, Li Chunhong looked up and said. Professor Zhang set the file down on the table. We can confirm it. The young man in the footage is a resident of Yunhai City. His name is Chen Fan. Several faces in the room shifted at once. Our own citizen really is from Yunhai City. He's actually alive. Professor Zhang shook his head. We don't know that for certain yet, but the match is extremely high. One of the older officials, over 60, frowned. Should we disclose this to the other civilization branches? Someone else immediately pushed back. Disclose it? Wouldn't that make us stand out too much? A Yunhai City resident out there in the wild, apparently in possession of the Meta civilization's communication device. If word gets out, what will the other cities think? Li Chunhong's voice dropped lower. Even if we don't announce it, they'll figure it out eventually. He's speaking our language after all. The older official looked at her. You're suggesting we disclose it proactively? Li Chunhong nodded. This is a card we're holding, and a strong one at that. Right now, all 17 cities are cooperating on the surface, but information won't stay free forever. You have technology, I don't. You're not going to hand it over without expecting something in return eventually. It'll turn into a transaction sooner or later. And Chen Fan is our direct bargaining chip with the outside world. As long as he's alive, Yunhai City holds a certain mystique. During negotiations, others will think twice before pushing too hard, and thinking twice means conceding ground. The older official fell silent for a moment, then sighed quietly. A prisoner's dilemma. Exactly, Li Chunhong said. But we don't really have a choice here. The phrase fellow humans isn't enough to make 17 cities hold nothing back from each other. We can trust others to a point, but we can't hand over our lives on good faith alone. A moment later, Li Chunhong suddenly asked, what about Chen Fan's family? Have we located them? The liaison officer answered immediately. We have. His father, Lu Changhua, is a psychiatrist at Yunhai City's third hospital. His mother is also a doctor there. His younger sister, Chen Xiaoyu, is a senior at Yunhai Experimental High School. His grandparents on both sides likely remained on Earth and weren't transported here. Li Chunhong nodded and picked up her phone. I'll call him myself. The call connected, and a middle-aged man's voice came through. Hello, third hospital psychiatry department. Who am I speaking with? Li Chunhong softened her tone. This is the Yunhai City government office. Is Dr. Lu Changhua there? Is Chen Fan your son? On the other end, his breathing visibly tightened. Yes, he didn't come home yesterday. Did you find him? Or is he still back on Earth? Li Chunhong didn't answer directly. We're going to send you a photo. Please confirm whether the person in it is Chen Fan. A few seconds later, the picture message came through. There was a long silence on the other end, then his breathing quickened. That should be him. He's lost so much weight. Where is he? Is he hurt? Li Chunhong spoke steadily. Dr. Lu, please don't panic. We have one more question. Has Chen Fan ever shown signs of awakening a superpower? A superpower? Lu Changhua clearly froze. I don't know. He never mentioned anything like that to me. In the meeting room, several people exchanged glances. Not knowing was perfectly normal after all. Abilities like these were hard for others to notice unless the person mentioned it or used it openly. They called Chen Fan's mother next and got the same answer. Finally, they called his younger sister. Chen Xiaoyu's voice came through, young and clearly anxious. Hello? Yes? We're calling from the Yunhai City government. Is this Chen Xiaoyu? That's me. We wanted to ask, has your brother Chen Fan ever mentioned anything about having superpowers? There were 2 seconds of silence on the line, then the girl spoke quietly. He did mention something. Li Chunhong's expression sharpened. What kind of ability? He said it was called something like a pocket dimension. He only just awakened it a few days ago. He hadn't even had time to report it yet. The girl's voice trembled. Sir, ma'am, where did my brother go? Did something happen to him? Li Chunhong gripped the phone, pausing for a moment. How exactly was she supposed to explain this? Your brother isn't on Earth anymore, and he's not in the safe zone either. He's apparently ended up somewhere inside the ruins of the Meta civilization. Who would even believe that? In the end, Li Chunhong simply simply said, "Xiaoyu, please, try to stay calm. We'll have someone reach out to your family directly. We'll explain Chen Fan's situation to you in person." After hanging up, the meeting room erupted immediately. The younger researchers could barely contain their excitement. A pocket dimension, an ability that Rare was almost unheard of. Based on what his sister had described, Chen Fan could apparently create an independent, isolated pocket of space and hide himself inside it, completely invisible and untouchable from the outside. Wasn't that essentially a space manipulation ability? Someone immediately added more context. According to publicly available records on Earth, there were only ever two known space manipulation ability users, one capable of short-range teleportation and another capable of phasing through walls. Chen Fan's pocket dimension ability sounded even more advanced than either of those two. Li Chunhong stared at the file, her frown deepening by the second. So how exactly did he end up out there in the first place? One of the researchers suddenly smacked his forehead. "I have a theory," he said. At the moment the civilization selection process activated and Earth vanished, Chen Fan was likely already inside his pocket dimension. But since he wasn't physically present in normal space at that moment, he got skipped over entirely. The room went quiet. Professor Zhang's eyes lit up, and he immediately grabbed a pen and started sketching circles on the table. Exactly. Earth was one large space. Chen Fan's pocket dimension was a separate, smaller space entirely. The safe zone selection process was designed to capture life forms within normal space, but he was hiding inside his own private pocket, which meant he slipped right past the entire mechanism. Li Chunhong's face twitched slightly. Would the Stellar Alliance really make a mistake like that? Zhang shook his head. This might not even count as a mistake, technically. If this entity operates through fixed rules and programmed logic, then this is simply a gap in the mechanism, not a case of it failing to notice Chen Fan, but rather Chen Fan never being within its scanning range at all. Everyone fell silent for a couple of seconds. Then someone muttered quietly, "That's just incredibly unlucky for him, though. Barely awakens his powers, decides to mess around with them for fun, and boom, Earth disappears while he's in there." The tense atmosphere in the room finally eased a bit. Li Chunhong even let out a small laugh. "Talk about bad luck. I was in the middle of hosting the opening ceremony for the Culture Festival, hadn't even put the microphone down yet, and suddenly the whole city just lifted off into the sky." A military major chimed in. "Mine was scarier. My unit was in the middle of grenade throwing drills. Right as a soldier threw his grenade, the whole city launched skyward. One of the new recruits went completely pale, convinced he'd just blown up the entire planet." The laughter in the room grew louder. Professor Zhang cleared his throat, pulling the conversation back on track. "Everyone, Chen Fan's current situation is genuinely dangerous. We've got 10 million people hiding in the safe zone, too scared to even step outside. And he's out there completely alone on the Pangu Continent, where time moves 100 times faster than it does for us. We need to find some way to help him." Li Chunhong knocked on the table. "First, we can make Chen Fan's identity public. Clearly inform the other cities that he belongs to Yunhai City. Don't let anyone else falsely claim him, and don't let them speculate wildly either." Several people nodded. "Disclosure actually works in our favor here. There's no point hiding it," Li Chunhong continued. "Second, we focus our research on communication methods. His device appears to be malfunctioning. He can transmit video to us, but he can't receive our messages. We need to find some way to let him know we're here." Someone immediately asked, "Do we have anyone with remote communication abilities? Telepathy usually manifests between twins. Chen Fan does have a sister, but they're not twins, and she doesn't currently have any powers either. What about the other cities?" "Unknown for now." Everyone talked over each other, but no matter how they approached it, they kept hitting the same wall. There was nothing they could actually do. Yunhai City couldn't send so much as a single message through, forced to watch helplessly from behind a screen. Several of the older officials couldn't hold on any longer, having gone a full day and night without sleep, their eyes bloodshot. Li Chunhong stood up. "Everyone, let's rest for now. We'll keep monitoring Chen Fan's situation, but Yunhai City also needs to get production back up and running. 10 million people need food, water, and order maintained." She turned to Zhang Hui. "Professor Zhang, I'll need you to keep holding down the fort. Please keep an eye on the international communication side of things too." Zhang nodded. "Don't worry, I've got plenty of young researchers here, all too excited to sleep anyway." Li Chunhong smiled faintly. "This new world really does depend on people like you." The moment the officials left, Zhang let out a yawn himself, thinking about resting his head on the desk for just a few minutes. But his mind was racing too hard to actually sleep. Too many supernatural phenomena to process. Too heavy a workload. The first major issue was food. Yunhai City covered 12,000 square kilometers, which sounded like a lot. But feeding, housing, and sustaining 10 million people was no small joke. Farmland was insufficient. Food reserves were limited. If they couldn't find high-yield crops soon, people would eventually start starving. Zhang pressed his temples and told his staff, "A year's worth of food reserves is actually pretty solid, all things considered. Other cities might not even have that much." Just as he finished speaking, the phone rang. Zhang picked up. "What is it?" The voice on the other end was trembling with urgency. "Professor Zhang, the communication device screen just lit up again. It's Chen Fan. Chen Fan is initiating a communication request." Zhang shot up out of his chair. "Quick, get to the communication room." Meanwhile, back on the Pangu Continent, inside the Meta Civilization's abandoned data center, I was busy eating. I'd sliced the meat into thin strips first, then seared it on a metal plate, the juices sizzling twitching and popping. I sprinkled on salt, added some mushrooms, and tossed in a few freshly picked green chili peppers. The smell hit me instantly. I picked up a slice with my fingers and popped it into my mouth. Crispy on the outside, tender on the inside. My whole body relaxed completely. Absolutely satisfying. Now this was a proper meal. Beside me, the massive iron sphere had been soaking up sunlight all day. Between bites, I kept pressing its buttons. Come on, old buddy, you've got plenty of charge by now. Don't play dead on me. Connect me to human civilization. I typed in the code number again. Once, twice, a third time. Honestly, I had no real confidence it would work, but my hands just wouldn't stop trying anyway. What if this time it actually connected? Just give me one shot and I could shake up all of human civilization with it. I patted the iron sphere. Light up for me, buddy. The screen stayed dark. I gritted my teeth. Human civilization. Can you hear me? This is Chen Fan, still alive here. I need to make contact. I took another bite of meat. Oh, and by the way, this fire salamander meat is genuinely delicious. Meanwhile, back in the safe zone, in Yunhai City's communication room, this exact scene was being projected onto a massive city's civilization management device. The researchers watched me eating, their eyes practically bulging out of their heads. One young doctoral student's voice wavered. Is that the giant salamander he's eating? Beside him, a female researcher's face had gone completely pale. The flesh and blood of a transcendent creature, and he'd just casually pan-seared it. This should have been reserved for actual scientific research, organ regeneration experiments, cultivating advanced antibiotics, maybe even breeding mutated plant seeds from it. Watching that one bite, the female researcher paused, her voice trembling. That single bite might represent $10 million in research funding right there. Another researcher pointed out, money doesn't really mean much anymore at this point. She glanced at him. Then call it $10 million worth of scientific research material wasted. This wasn't just carelessness. This was practically torturing every research scientist watching. And right at that exact moment, I let out a sigh at the dark screen. Man, eating this stuff all the time is getting old. I'd honestly kill for a bowl of plain white rice right now. Dead silence fell over the communication room. A few seconds later, someone muttered quietly, "I'm losing my sympathy for this guy. Is he seriously bragging right now?" The female researcher clutched her chest. Peak humble bragging. I'm out here scraping together every last cent for my experiments, and he's over there getting sick of eating transcendent creature meat. How is that fair? Zhang Hui stared at the screen, his mouth twitching. Don't feel too bad for yourselves. At the very least, this confirms one thing. He has food, and good quality food at that. That comment finally eased the tension in the room slightly. Right, he was still alive, still eating meat, still complaining about wanting rice instead. That counted as good news. Right at that moment, another communication device chimed. Human Civilization Branch 6 was requesting contact. Zhang immediately said, "Connect it." The screen lit up and Professor Edward appeared, getting straight to the point. Professor Zhang, is this young man from your city, Yunhai City? Did he somehow find a way into the Pangu Continent? This method could be critically important for all of humanity. Zhang paused half a second, then smiled. I can only confirm one thing. This young man who ended up on the Pangu Continent by accident is indeed one of our own citizens from Yunhai City. Everything else is classified. Professor Edward narrowed his eyes. So, do you have a way to actually reach him? Zhang countered. Does your city have anyone with remote telepathic communication abilities? Edward immediately understood the implication. You can't reach him either then? He chuckled. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone like that at the moment either. But we could still exchange resources here. Zhang sat up straighter. I'm listening, Edward continued. Chen Fan's communication device is most likely only malfunctioning at the screen and speaker level. The core system is probably still functional, otherwise the video feed wouldn't be coming through at all. So we could bypass the screen and audio entirely and try reaching him through some other function. Zhang's expression sharpened. Such as a vibration channel. Edward raised his hand, signaling for his assistant to operate something. The next instant, the massive iron sphere sitting in Yunhai City's communication room suddenly vibrated. Buzz. It let out a short, sharp alert tone too. Everyone in the room immediately turned toward the sphere. Zhang's eyes lit up. There's a function like that? Edward nodded. A backup channel. Screen's broken, speaker's broken. But the hardware vibration function might still be operational. We're willing to share this method with you. This particular vibration, though, needs to be sent by you to Chen Fan. Zhang fell silent for a moment. Edward continued. His time moves 100 times faster than ours. Every minute you hesitate could mean a significant stretch of time has already passed for him. Professor Zhang, let him know first. Let him know humanity heard him. That line hit exactly where it needed to. Zhang didn't hesitate any further. Understood. We won't forget this favor. Edward smiled. Future negotiations and cooperation matter more than mutual suspicion. Zhang nodded. At least for now, that's true. Meanwhile, back on the Pangu Continent. I sat in front of the iron sphere, growing increasingly irritated by this point. The screen was still dark. No sound. No response. I gave it a light kick with my foot. I should have known better. The bigger the hope, hope, the bigger the disappointment. Unable to hold back my frustration any longer, I cursed at the sphere a few times in a row. Human civilization. Are you people even listening? Give me some kind of response here. Hearing me shout, the wolf pack came bounding over in a rush. One after another, they circled around me, wagging their tails. Several thick tails swatting against my body like little brooms sweeping back and forth. I flinched, my brow twitching from the constant swatting. What are you all doing? I was calling out to humans, not you lot. Right then, the wolf pups squeezed their way in too. Yes, during that week I'd spent recovering from my illness, the female wolves had given birth. Litter after litter. The camp had suddenly gained over a dozen tiny new additions. Short stubby legs, round little bellies, still wobbling unsteadily as they walked. One wolf pup flopped down right at my feet, letting out a soft, babyish cry, its round little eyes staring straight up at me, directly assaulting my willpower. My expression tensed. No, absolutely not. I can't start feeding you too. You're wolves. You need to be independent. The pup wrapped itself around my ankle and kept crying. I held out for a solid 3 seconds before caving and pulling out a small dried fish. Here, eat up. The pup swallowed it whole in one gulp, tail wagging furiously. I smacked my own forehead. Why did I just feed it again? I pointed accusingly at the old wolf. This is all your fault, causing me all this trouble. The old wolf's leg still hadn't fully healed, limping noticeably as he walked. He let out a wounded little whimper, as if to say, wolf packs are matriarchal societies. This really has nothing to do with me. I gave him a light kick anyway. Don't play innocent with me. From now on, you're the one taking them hunting. If they want meat, they catch it themselves. Stop mooching off me every single day. I can't keep spoiling you all like this. 3 seconds later, I grabbed another handful of dried fish and tossed it out anyway. I froze completely. Why did I just feed them again? Why is my willpower so pathetically weak? Right at that exact moment, buzz, buzz, buzz. The massive sphere suddenly vibrated twice. I whipped my head around instantly. It moved. I lunged toward it, my pupils shrinking, slamming my hand directly onto the metal casing. Humans, don't tell me they actually got through. The next second, the excitement on my face froze solid. The screen still hadn't lit up, only the cold iron sphere was heating up rapidly. Then, immediately after, beep, a long, drawn-out alarm blared out. My heart lurched, and I instinctively stumbled half a step backward. Oh, come on. Please don't tell me this thing is about to explode. I stared at it, hesitated for 2 seconds, then decisively powered it down. Forget it. Staying alive matters more. I'm not about to let my own home base get blown to smithereens. Back at the Institute of Supernatural Research, the screen had suddenly flashed blue. Connection with the other party has been terminated. Would you like to reinitiate contact? The whole room erupted. He'd shut it off. He'd cut the video feed. Quick, reconnect immediately. Please wait. Attempting to reach the Meta civilization now. No response for a long stretch. Professor Zhang smacked his own forehead. This is bad. We tried to help and ended up making things worse instead. Someone said urgently, weren't we just trying to tell him we'd made contact with humanity? Zhang took a deep breath. The problem is he almost certainly doesn't know Morse code, and our two sides don't share the same time flow. 1 second on our end is 100 seconds on his. We can't even send vibrations continuously either. After all that waiting, all we managed to send was a single vibration paired with an alarm. Put yourself in his position. Wouldn't you shut it down too? Everyone fell silent. Zhang rubbed his forehead. The good news is the alert vibration channel actually works. The bad news is the information we can send through it is far too limited, and Chen Fan clearly misread the situation completely. Zhang immediately called an information science expert named Professor Shang. The call connected, and once Professor Shang heard the full request, he was stunned. Professor Zhang, this request is honestly a bit absurd. The buzzer can only produce a simple beep. That's a hardware limitation, plain and simple, Zhang spoke quickly. My expectations aren't high. Just let him know at minimum that he's successfully reached humanity, and also tell him not to shut the device off. Professor Shang paused for 2 seconds. That's actually simpler than Morse code. Difficult? Sure, but let me pull some people together and try. Soon enough, a whole team of specialists gathered around the metal sphere and got to work. It can produce square waves and triangle waves if we combine them creatively. Could we simulate more complex syllable patterns? Move fast, everyone. 1 hour passes here, but several days pass for him. If we drag this out any longer, he might not make it. Right at that exact moment, a single voice rang out in everyone's mind simultaneously. Item attribute system generation complete. Transcendent items are now categorized into 8 tiers: inferior, common, fine, exceptional, legendary, epic, immortal, and mythic. With an appraisal-related skill, users can now identify a transcendent item's tier and effects. Zhang's face changed instantly. Why does the Stellar Alliance choose this exact moment to roll out an equipment system update? Meanwhile, out on the Pangu Continent, sitting outside my shelter on a rock, cultivating quietly as my transcendent spark pulsed gently, that same cold voice suddenly dropped in. Item Attribute system generation complete. Transcendent item tier system now open. I opened my eyes. An equipment system. The wolves around me showed no reaction whatsoever, and the pups were still busy nipping at each other playfully. Seemed like only sentient, intelligent beings could actually hear this notification. I didn't dwell on it much and immediately pulled out 3 transcendent items I had on hand for appraisal. The juvenile abyssal demon spider's back pattern, capable of inducing mental intimidation, rated exceptional tier. The crimson spirit crystal, rated fine tier. The fire salamander leather, rated common tier. As for the fuel crystals, they didn't even qualify for a tier at all. I raised an eyebrow. Standards were pretty demanding, apparently. Then, staring at the fire salamander leather, something shifted in my expression. A man-made transcendent item was almost certainly tied to a brand new milestone. I stood up immediately, my motivation crystal clear. Grab the reward first, beat every other civilization to it. I had the materials, and I had a 100-fold time advantage. Knowing that milestones came with rewards, that alone was already an edge. Time to get to work right now. I walked back into the shelter and switched the giant sphere back on. The indicator light flickered on. This time, no vibration, no alarm. I breathed a sigh of relief. Fine, as long as it doesn't explode. Whether human civilization can actually hear me or not doesn't really matter right now. I'll just demonstrate this once, this legendary milestone system. I'd never tanned leather before in my life, but I knew you couldn't just leave raw hide sitting around indefinitely or it would rot away completely. Step 1. Cleaning and degreasing. I dug through the ruins and found a bucket of degraded powder, likely old laundry detergent, still containing residual sodium carbonate and sodium silicate, giving it some mild cleaning properties. Conditions weren't ideal, but it would have to do. I dumped the fire salamander hide into it and let it soak for 2 full days. Then I scraped away the fat with a knife, stretched the hide out, and left it to dry in the sun. My pioneer's eye flashed a notification. Fire salamander leather, common tier, downgrade pending. My eyelid twitched. A downgrade indicator, meaning quality was actively dropping. I gritted my teeth and kept working anyway. This wasn't just hide, this was my future clothes, pants, shoes. This was my survival equipment out here on the Pangu Continent. Once it finished drying, the notification updated again. Partially cleaned transcendent creature leather, its tanner apparently too stingy to invest in decent cleaning agents, common tier, minus. My face darkened. 2 downgrade markers, that was really pushing it. My pioneer's eye continued with a suggestion. Requires a tanning agent, alum specifically, which would enhance elasticity, durability, water resistance, and wrinkle resistance. I smacked my forehead. Alum, I recalled seeing something like that back in the chemical plant ruins. I called out, "Old wolf, come on, let's go scavenge." Meanwhile, back in the safe zone, Chen Fan had reconnected, and the research institute buzzed with renewed excitement. But this time, nobody dared trigger a vibration recklessly. They'd wait for a proper new signal plan before risking shutting the connection down again. Otherwise, they'd be in serious trouble. I'd been working out on the Pangu Continent for several days straight, while barely over an hour had passed back in the safe zone. Too much footage was streaming in for anyone to keep up. The institute immediately brought on more staff, graduate students, doctoral researchers, psychology specialists, materials experts, all hands on deck. Someone watching the feed murmured quietly, "He's deliberately angling the camera toward his work area. We can't be sure he even knows if we can see him, but he clearly still wants to share this." A psychology specialist noted this behavior down. Sharing footage like this was likely a way of coping with isolation. Another researcher, watching me haul that heavy leather around, remarked, "His physical condition doesn't add up. An ordinary person doing this much manual labor would have collapsed from exhaustion by now. Could he possibly have more than one ability? Better document that for now." Right then, someone pointed toward the corner of the screen. "Wait, look, that's a city ruin." In the footage, collapsed buildings and rusted rebar flashed briefly into view. The room fell silent. The Meta civilization. It really did go extinct after all. Nobody said anything further because everyone's mind had jumped to the exact same question. What about the 8 eras before this one? What happened to all those other civilizations? In the end, only silence remained. After a moment, the materials specialist finally spoke up. "His tanning technique is genuinely crude, but managing to accomplish even this much completely alone is honestly impressive. He clearly intends to survive here long term." Right as he finished speaking, on the screen, I came trudging back to the shelter carrying a huge bucket of supplies, my face practically glowing with the joy of a successful haul. I held up the plastic bucket triumphantly. "Alum's here." I dumped the alum into water, added a bit of industrial salt, and started stirring the massive vat. The hides were incredibly heavy, each one weighing well over 100 pounds. As I stirred, I made light of my own suffering out loud. 9th era of the Pangu Continent, 4:15 in the morning. Old Chen here, sleeping in a broken down building, got woken up by wolves barking at him to get up. The wolf let out a loud howl, translated into human speech, that basically means time to get to work. I couldn't help but laugh at my own joke as I said it. Exhausting as it was, I had my transcendent spark and my eternal body working in my favor. As long as I didn't push myself past the point of real damage, I'd bounce back fully by the next day. My 3 core attributes were climbing fast too. That fire salamander meat definitely hadn't gone gone to waste. I'm probably one of the physically strongest humans alive right now, I thought to myself. I kept at it. Flipping the hides, drying them out, another 2 full days passed. Finally, the fire salamander leather shifted from fiery red to a deep brownish red, and most of the fishy odor had faded away too. I immediately checked its rating. Hand-tanned transcendent creature leather. Due to crude and unrefined technique, quality has degraded. Inferior tier, hidden ability, heat resistance, currently unactivated. The smile vanished from my face instantly. Inferior tier. I rushed over to inspect it. An entire stack of leather, every single piece rated inferior. All that grueling effort, and the quality had completely collapsed. Back on Earth, mass-produced goods were basically worthless. Handmade items were the real luxury items. What did the Stellar Alliance even understand about craftsmanship? I complained plenty, but the leather quality wasn't coming back regardless. I could only console myself. Whatever, inferior tier still technically counts as a rated item, and once I turn it into actual gear, it should still trigger a milestone. The handmade craftsman, that's me. Next, I prepared needle and thread. For the needle, I used one of the abyssal demon spider's leg hooks. For the thread, vine bark harvested from the man-eating flower. I nodded, satisfied. Materials-wise, this was maxed out in style, at least. I had zero sewing experience, but I figured if I kept threading these two hides together long enough, something would eventually come together. First project, a sleeping bag. I'd been going without a proper blanket this whole time, and it left me feeling constantly unsettled. I selected the softest leather from the fire salamander's belly area. It had a texture almost like carpet. After some thought, I decided to make it a double-sized version. Bigger was never a bad call. The old wolf wandered over and immediately rolled himself right onto the sleeping bag. I kicked him off instantly. Get lost, this is my bed. The wolf pups came charging in too, over a dozen little furballs swarming the sleeping bag, nipping and tumbling over each other, letting out squeaky little cries. I couldn't bring myself to shoo them away, my expression softening completely. Fine, go ahead, enjoy the luxury bed for now. 3 hours later. The sleeping bag was finished. I immediately checked its rating. Fire salamander sleeping bag, sewn from inferior tier transcendent creature leather. Excellent insulation, decent comfort. However, due to crude manufacturing technique, its appearance is genuinely embarrassing. What an absolute waste of good materials. I stared at that final line, my expression freezing. Doesn't even qualify as a transcendent item. So what happens to the milestone now? I immediately flipped back through the Meta Civilization's archived records. Before long, I found the key detail. Fire salamander leather carried inherent heat resistance, but once the creature died, that property remained dormant, unactivated, unless properly awakened, leaving it as nothing more than ordinary leather. The records outlined 3 possible methods. First, physical calibration, using microelectrical currents to simulate nerve signals. I immediately shook my head. Where exactly would I even get microelectrical currents out here? Second, catalytic calibration, using materials of differing properties to mutually activate one another. I kept shaking my head. The Meta Civilization had needed 300 years of research just to get the basics down. If I tried learning that from scratch now, I'd be waiting forever. Third, spiritual calibration, relying purely on natural talent, intuition, and that flash of inspiration unique to master craftsmen. 10 minutes later, staring down at my own crooked, uneven stitching, I fell silent. Understood. I clearly wasn't some master craftsman. I turned my attention to something else entirely. The juvenile abyssal demon spider's back pattern, capable of producing mental intimidation, exceptional tier, a naturally occurring marvel. This pattern's ability had activated entirely on its own, naturally. My breathing steadied. If I built gear around this, surely it would qualify for a rating no matter what. Exceptional tier material, even dropping 2 full tiers, would still leave it well within range. But I didn't rush into it immediately, because I only had one of these, and if I gambled and lost, I wouldn't get access to better material like this again anytime soon. I decided to practice first making a proper bed for the old wolf. He loved it, and the pups loved it too. Then I moved on to crafting leather coats, leather jackets, leather pants, one piece after another. I worked through the days and cultivated through the nights. Ate fire salamander meat when hungry, slept when exhausted. My tailoring skills went from clumsy to genuinely competent. I kept getting faster, kept getting steadier with each piece. Meanwhile, that metal sphere was still switched on the whole time. I'd simply gotten too busy to remember to turn it off. As I stitched leather together, my mind drifted back to my college entrance exams back on Earth. Back then, I used to stay up late and wake up early, looking every bit the dedicated student on the surface. But in reality, I spent plenty of that time zoning out, which was exactly why my scores ended up thoroughly average. I got into an ordinary university, lived an ordinary life. Thinking about it now stirred up a small pang of sadness. sadness. If fate ever gave me a second chance, my hands paused mid-stitch for a moment. What would I actually do differently? A single thought surfaced in both my mind and body simultaneously. I've basically been reborn into a whole new existence. Shouldn't I be chasing a relationship already? No, wait. Shouldn't I focus on studying properly this time? Get into a top university? My thoughts spiraled wildly in every direction, but my hands never stopped moving. Over the course of a month, I produced 5 leather jackets, 5 pairs of pants, 10 pairs of underwear, 20 pairs of socks, and 3 pairs of boots. I flexed my fingers and couldn't help but laugh. Not bad at all. I've genuinely developed a real skill here. Shame none of it had activated any inherent properties. None of it qualified as a transcendent item. My pioneer's eye offered its evaluation. A carefully hand-stitched pair of leather boots, remarkably durable, but with no activated supernatural properties, unable to be classified as a man-made marvel. Simply a luxury good. I let out a long breath, unable to find any real fault in the craftsmanship at this point. Time for the main event then. I pulled out the juvenile abyssal demon spider's back pattern along with the last remaining piece of fire salamander leather. I planned to craft a leather shield. The toughest, thickest, most resilient leather came from the salamander's hindquarters, perfect material for a shield. The palm-sized spider pattern needed to be carefully embedded into the leather. Simple in concept, but every step demanded painstaking precision. Finally, a circular leather shield came together, 70 centimeters in diameter, small enough to hold in one hand or strap onto an arm. Right at its center sat that blood-red, eyeball-like spider pattern. I gripped the shield in my left hand, grabbed a tree branch with my right, and charged straight toward the wolf pack. Alright, let's see how this works. The pups had grown remarkably fast, already gaining well over 10 pounds within just a month. The moment they spotted the shield, their eyes widened first, then, an instant later, they all turned tail and bolted, yelping the entire way as they fled. Only the old wolf circled around me, completely unimpressed. He'd already studied this object before and knew perfectly well it was just an inanimate object. That old wolf still had some sharp instincts left in him after all. I forced down my rising excitement and used my pioneer's eye to appraise it properly. Leather shield, a defensive weapon crafted from multiple materials, its central eyeball motif carries an effect that intimidates the enemy's mind. Due to crude crafting technique, the material's full potential was never realized. Man-made marvel, inferior tier. My expression froze. I'd poured my best possible materials into this, and it still came out inferior. Still, I'd hit my target regardless. The next instant, that familiar cold voice rang out once more. Congratulations, you have earned a unique milestone. Transcendent Craftsman. Among all civilizations, you are the first to successfully forge a genuine transcendent item. Milestone reward, Daedalus's craftsman talent and sewing toolkit, currently being transmitted. My eyes lit up instantly. Just as I suspected, I hadn't misjudged this after all. White light descended, slamming directly into my mind, like an entire library of knowledge forcibly poured straight into my soul. I collapsed on the spot, drenched in sweat. Among countless competing civilizations, I'd been the very first to successfully craft a genuine transcendent item. Several hours later, I woke up soaked in sweat and immediately grabbed a cup, gulping down water desperately. In front of me sat a large bronze-colored chest. A new passive ability had also appeared, Craftsman's Talent, dramatically enhancing my spatial reasoning and making me far more skilled with any tool I picked up. Occasionally, flashes of inspiration would strike, revealing subtle threads of order hidden within the supernatural world. I picked up needle and thread, and a wave of familiarity washed over me instantly, as if I'd been sewing for 60 straight years already. You're a little late to the party, I muttered. My materials are almost completely used up by now. Still, better late than never. Let's see exactly what this Daedalus sewing toolkit actually is. I walked over and opened the chest sitting in front of me. Inside sat a red box. Opening that revealed a blue box inside. My expression grew increasingly strange with each layer. Seriously, nesting dolls? After opening 7 or 8 boxes in a row, I finally reached a small crystal case about the size of a pencil box. Inside sat a bronze-colored pair of scissors, a dagger, a ruler-like instrument, 12 needles of varying sizes, and a small golden booklet. My pioneer's eye supplied the details. Daedalus's sewing toolkit, a mysterious relic left behind by the master craftsman Daedalus of the 7th era's Crete civilization. This master craftsman had committed a crime against civilization itself, and before his death, he cast this toolkit into a pocket dimension, declaring that no one would ever inherit his legacy again. But pocket dimensions eventually break down over time, and that's exactly how this toolkit ended up in my possession. I glanced up toward the sky. That's a pretty shameless way to spin it. This was clearly meant as a reward, yet fate's framing it like I just happened to stumble stumble onto it. Then a realization hit me. The Stellar Alliance doesn't actually produce anything itself, it's just a middleman, a delivery service. Every reward I've ever received has actually been something left behind by some other civilization entirely. My pioneer's eye continued displaying details. This sewing toolkit's primary materials were orichalcum and refined gold, granting it exceptional durability. It also came bundled with Daedalus's own personal craftsmanship insights. Man-made marvel, exceptional tier. I sucked in a sharp breath. An exceptional tier toolkit. I'd busted my back just to craft one measly inferior tier shield, and the reward for it turned out to be an exceptional tier toolkit outright. Talk about a gift falling straight from the heavens. I picked up the scissors, and a warm, gentle sensation flowed through my hand immediately. Daedalus's scissors, exceptional tier equipment resonance power. While focused in use, grants a 8.1% boost to physique and a 3.3% boost to vitality. My eyes flickered with surprise. This thing actually boosts my stats too? Wasn't this basically real equipment then? The scissors carried two abilities: render, capable of effortlessly cutting through most materials, and clean cut, leaving perfectly smooth edges with no fraying whatsoever. Shame it was too small to double as a weapon. I picked up the dagger next, 25 centimeters long, its bronze edge glinting faintly. Daedalus's hide-cutting knife, trait, unmatched sharpness, capable of slicing through most leathers. Exceptional tier equipment resonance power. While focused in use, grants a 9.2% boost to physique, 3.3% to vitality, and 4.5% to spirit. I gave it a couple of test swings, and it handled beautifully. This could genuinely double as a weapon. Next, I picked up the ruler-like instrument. This turned out to be the true core of the entire toolkit. When pressed against leather, it could sense the underlying threads running through transcendent items. I touched it to the leather shield I'd just finished, and sure enough, a faint pulse, almost like a heartbeat, echoed back through it. Except a lot of those internal threads had already been damaged by my crude craftsmanship. That stung a little. Fine, at least it still functions somewhat. Daedalus's ruler, exceptional tier equipment resonance power. While focused in use, grants an 8.9% boost to spirit. Finally, there was the small golden booklet. Inside, tiny sesame seed-sized text covered every page alongside strange diagrams. Daedalus's personal manual, documenting knowledge of transcendent material applications and sewing techniques. But I lacked the foundational knowledge required, and even my mighty pioneer's eye couldn't translate it. It was like having a Goldbach conjecture proof laid out in front of me, utterly incomprehensible regardless. I felt both delighted and frustrated at once. Alright, fine, this thing really was impressive. This reward held enormous value for an entire civilization. If the 7th Era's Crete civilization could produce exceptional tier equipment like this, their technology had to be leagues beyond humanity's, especially this resonance power. The equipment practically felt alive. If human scientists ever got their hands on this, they'd surely extract a wealth of knowledge from it. But for me personally, its usefulness was limited for now. I didn't have that kind of knowledge base, nor a complete industrial system to work with. At best, I could use the dagger as an actual weapon. Even though I'd clearly hit the jackpot here, I couldn't help but sigh anyway. What a waste. Such a genuine waste. I even suspected that being the first to craft common, fine, and exceptional tier transcendent items respectively might each trigger separate milestones of their own. But that felt like a distant goal. There was no way one person alone could claim every single reward out there. Whatever, a free dagger's still a free dagger, no point turning it down. Once I dug up a few more ruins, maybe I'd actually learn to use the rest of this properly. I steadied myself and refocused. Next step, making my own life more comfortable. Right then, I noticed the massive sphere sitting nearby, still switched on after nearly 2 months straight, its red indicator light still blinking steadily. Knowing full well it was probably useless junk, I still struck a composed, dignified pose and said calmly, "Humans, did you see that? That's a milestone reward right there. I'm the first civilization to ever craft a genuine transcendent item, and that's exactly why the Stellar Alliance rewarded me." I patted the leather shield, then picked up the dagger. Stay one step ahead, and you stay ahead forever. Any truly powerful civilization has to keep pushing to the front of the pack. Once I said that, I actually felt pretty satisfied with myself. Whether the signal actually reached anyone or not, at least I'd gotten it off my chest. By this point, I'd been on the Pangu Continent for 5 whole months, and I'd basically sorted out food, clothing, shelter, and daily necessities. But for the people back in the safe zone, less than 2 full days had passed. And in those 2 days, Yunhai City had nearly been crushed flat by harsh reality. The currency system had collapsed entirely, and all the bank records were gone. Mortgages, savings accounts, everything had descended into chaos, and the internet was flooded with arguments. If the banks can't even access account records anymore, does that mean nobody has to pay their mortgage? What if I never bought a house in the first place? My landlord's telling me to get out, saying money's basically worthless paper now. Stay calm, everyone. Find food first. Supermarkets had shut down entirely, and most households had only about 2 days of food left. Does anyone have fever medicine? The hospitals have all closed. Once the economy collapsed, private social orders started collapsing right along with it. The only thing that mattered right now could be summed up in two words: staying alive. Tens of thousands of people stood packed shoulder to shoulder in Yunhai City's government plaza. Li Chunhong had only slept 4 hours, her eyes bloodshot with exhaustion. She grabbed a megaphone and addressed the crowd directly. "Everyone, please don't panic. I'm going to walk you through our latest policies. First, we guarantee every citizen's right to housing." The crowd fell silent instantly. Li Chunhong continued, "Your first home remains entirely your own property. No matter the size, no matter how much you still owed on it, it belongs to you personally. The Yunhai City government guarantees every resident's private property rights." That statement alone brought visible relief to a lot of faces. But the very next moment, Li Chunhong's tone shifted. "However, any second property, any additional homes beyond your first, will now belong collectively to the community." A ripple of unrest passed through the crowd. Someone shouted angrily, "Why should that be fair?" Li Chunhong lowered her voice but held firm. "Because right now, there are people with nowhere to live at all. We're not on Earth anymore. This is a new world, not the old one we left behind. If we want to survive, we have to stabilize everyone first." Her tone stayed firm because there really wasn't another option. Renters couldn't be thrown out onto the streets, young people couldn't be allowed to spiral out of control, and landlords still retained at least one home to live in themselves. That was the bottom line here. Li Chunhong pressed on immediately. "Large supermarkets and grain warehouses have already been placed under mandatory government control. Criminal offenders have already been apprehended. Network communications are currently being restored. For urgent matters, please call the mayor's hotline directly. As for food, everyone can present their ID at their local community center to receive 1 week's worth of rations. The food might not be gourmet, but everyone will have enough to eat. Baby formula and diapers are also in reserve. Parents can claim these with proof of their child's birth certificate." The crowd visibly settled down. Then she raised her voice further. "Our food reserves currently stand at 1 year's worth, so we won't face shortages in the near term. But long term, we absolutely must restart production. Everyone, please plant vegetables on balconies, in open lots, wherever space allows. There's no outside rescue coming for us right now. We can only rely on ourselves. If society collapses into chaos, extinction is the only thing waiting for us." The moment she finished speaking, a soldier bellowed out, "All units, attention! Salute!" A row of soldiers snapped to attention and saluted in perfect unison, then began distributing food supplies to the gathered crowd. United as one, we get through this together. Soldiers unloaded supplies from large trucks while civilians lined up, collected their rations, and headed home. Order gradually stabilized across the plaza. Li Chunhong finally let out a breath of relief. Beside her, a young staff member muttered quietly, "I wonder how the other cities are handling this. Probably not nearly as well as us." Listening to that, Li Chunhong felt a complicated mix of emotions. This really was a competition between civilizations now. Yunhai City had managed to stabilize the situation this quickly, but there was no guarantee other cities were faring nearly as well. This was only short-term stability for now, though. Next came restoring employment, designing an entirely new currency system, and getting the economy running again. Before long, another call came through. "Mr. Li, should hospital medications be placed under state control? Many of these drugs we have no way to manufacture anymore." Li Chunhong stayed silent for a long moment. The government was now the ultimate safety net, and the pressure was immense. But people couldn't simply be left to suffer either. She finally spoke. "Any medication that's genuinely needed still needs to be administered. Anyone who can be saved needs to be saved, especially pregnant women and children. They represent our future, but we cannot sustain unlimited healthcare coverage indefinitely. We need a sustainable framework worked out as soon as possible, one that controls spending responsibly." The voice on the other end said quietly, "Restarting pharmaceutical manufacturing is going to be extremely difficult. Our raw material supply chains have been completely severed. Finding viable substitutes could take 3 to 5 years. Li Chunhong rubbed her temples. Finally, she said, "Prioritize pregnant women and children specifically, and put my name on the corresponding policy. I'll sign off on it myself." Difficult times demand that someone step up and make the hard calls. Meanwhile, pressure from the supernatural world kept mounting too. Mutated plants and animals were appearing, the number of superpowered individuals kept growing, and nobody had yet figured out exactly what a transcendent spark even was. Right at that moment, Li Chunhong received a call from the Supernatural Research Lab. She asked immediately, "Is Chen Fan still alive out there?" On the other end, Professor Zhang's voice came through, practically vibrating with excitement. "Still alive. He's sent us some critically important information. We're working on establishing proper communication with him right now." Back at the Supernatural Research Lab, my video feed had been streaming in for over 2 months straight, and most of the footage showed nothing but leatherworking and garment making. At first, the researchers found it fascinating, but after a while, everyone grew thoroughly numb to it. Watching someone sew leather offered limited informational value, so attention shifted instead toward the wolf pack. How exactly had he domesticated these wolves? And especially the pups. Their growth rate alone was worth documenting carefully. Then, finally, when I pulled out the spider's back pattern and started constructing the shield, the researchers snapped back to full attention instantly. That eyeball pattern is clearly significant. I've been staring at it, and there's something almost hypnotic about it. This is a genuine supernatural effect. Someone couldn't resist grumbling as usual. Imagine what real research could do with that. The very next moment, on screen, a beam of transmission light crashed down, and the ground itself visibly shook. Everyone flinched violently. In the footage, I'd been struck by that white light and was writhing in pain on the ground. Once the smoke cleared, a massive bronze-colored chest materialized straight out of the transmission beam. The lab fell dead silent instantly. What was that thing? Where did that chest even come from? Once I finally regained consciousness, I pulled out the scissors, dagger, ruler, needles, and small booklet. Everyone watching grew even more baffled. Right then, one researcher suddenly shouted, "Pause it! Look at the edge of the scissors. There's visible light distortion around them." The lab went utterly silent. This was a genuine supernatural interference phenomenon. Normally, something like this could only ever be observed under a microscope back in the lab. But this was macroscopic interference, visible on an entirely different scale, meaning this pair of scissors wasn't some ordinary object at all. It was a genuinely powerful supernatural artifact. They checked the dagger next. Same distortion present. The ruler, too, also present. Every researcher in that room felt their scalp prickle with unease. Then, in the footage, I walked up to the massive sphere and struck my composed, self-important pose again. Humans, did you see that? That's a milestone reward right there. I'm the first civilization to ever craft a genuine transcendent item. The lab absolutely exploded with reaction. Milestone rewards. The Stellar Alliance genuinely hands out real, tangible rewards. This was an overwhelming amount of information to process at once. Professor Zhang got woken up by someone from the next room over. He'd only managed 2 hours of sleep, his eyes still completely bloodshot. What happened? Professor Zhang, look at this. He glanced at the image for barely a second and nearly lost his balance entirely. Macroscopic supernatural interference confirmed. The very next moment, the communication device erupted with incoming requests. Human civilization, Branch 6 requesting contact, Branch 7 requesting contact, Branch 8 requesting contact. Professor Edward came online. The old man's eyes were ringed with exhaustion. His entire face flushed red with excitement. My God, would you look at what Chen Fan just received? An entire chest of treasure dropped straight out of the sky for him. Edward then pulled a young man into frame beside him. This is my assistant Jacob. He possesses telepathic abilities. Zhang immediately asked, can he reach Chen Fan directly? Jacob shook his head. Unfortunately not. We've never actually met each other in person. If I could get access to something he's personally worn or carried, there might be a small chance of connecting. Zhang frowned. That would require both sides opening up their respective safe zones simultaneously. Not feasible in the short term at all. Shortly after, chief scientists from various other cities started logging on one after another. Everyone converged around the exact same question. That chest of items had come directly from the Stellar Alliance as a reward. This discovery was absolutely critical. Every civilization could actively hunt down milestones now and accelerate their own development significantly. Everyone immediately turned their attention toward the Metal Sphere's milestone interface. 9th era civilization milestones currently displayable. 1. End the chaos and become a stable civilization. 2. Garbled data. 3. Lift the safe zone and advance onto the Pangu Continent. Unknown interference detected, database corrupted, unable to complete scan. Zhang's heart pounded seeing that first entry. A stable civilization? Was Yunhai City close to actually achieving that milestone? He asked cautiously. Everyone, has your city's internal chaos settled down yet? One professor with darker skin gave a wry smile. We still haven't restored power. Shopping centers got looted. Roads are completely blocked. I am holed up in the Research Institute under military protection. Edward sighed. Ours has completely fallen apart at this point. I'm currently working for a handful of major conglomerates now. There's nothing I can do for ordinary citizens anymore. Zhang listened, sweat beading on his forehead. This world had truly become surreal. Someone pressed further. Hasn't Yunhai City always been particularly stable, though? Zhang deflected smoothly. Human nature is universal, after all. Under enough panic, chaos becomes practically inevitable everywhere. Everyone nodded along. They liked hearing that framing. Li Chunhong, listening in nearby, immediately asked Zhang, aren't we basically stabilized by now overall? Why haven't we received a reward yet? What exactly is this stable civilization milestone still missing? Zhang thought it over. Utilities like water and electricity probably aren't the deciding factor here. After all, some civilizations out there don't even have modern technology at all. Everyone started guessing. Food supply, birth rate, or maybe average lifespan. Right then, then, a young doctoral researcher spoke up quietly. I think it's about continuity, about legacy, a civilization capable of passing itself down through generations. That's what actually counts as stable. Li Chunhong's eyes lit up instantly. Continuity, education. Without education, how could there even be a next generation? And without a next generation, a civilization simply dies out eventually. She immediately picked up the phone. Get schools reopened immediately. Her secretary's office scrambled. Arrange for children to return to school right now? Is that really that critical? Li Chunhong said firmly, of course it's critical. Aren't the teachers still around? Get them back to work. Once children are back in school, parents will finally feel some real peace of mind. We can even run supernatural-era safety courses online through the internet. Send the notice out immediately. Bottom line, this was really about satisfying specific conditions. Grab that milestone first, worry about the rest later. Before long, the education department sent out an official notice, embracing a new era, looking toward a new future, directed at all elementary, middle, high schools, and universities alike. First day back, strengthening students' safety awareness and helping them understand this entirely new world. Parents seeing this announcement actually felt considerably more reassured. Schools were reopening, which meant the city hadn't completely fallen apart after all. Meanwhile, the kids collectively lost their minds. Dad, I don't want to go to school. Mom, I haven't even finished enjoying my break yet. Objections denied regardless. In one residential building, a little girl asked, Dad, where are you headed? A middle-aged man grabbed some medicine, just dropping off some fever medicine for the neighbors next door. In another apartment nearby, a boy asked, Mom, what are you doing? His mother, busy sorting through supplies, replied, Didn't they say we need to start recycling waste materials? I'm just sorting out what can still be donated. A civilization can't rely on heroes alone. More often than not, it comes down to countless ordinary people simply doing their part properly, not causing harm, not adding to the chaos, and being willing to lend a hand when needed. Suddenly, that cold, familiar voice echoed across the entire city's skies. Every single person heard it simultaneously. Congratulations, your civilization has completed a milestone. Stable civilization, condition achieved. Among all competing civilizations, ranked within the top 100,000 for successfully managing internal chaos and establishing a stable, enduring civilizational legacy, human civilization. Branch 1's current ranking, 789th. If history were imagined as a vast flowing river, civilization represented the thickest, most powerful current running through it. A stable civilization allows history itself to journey that much further into the distant future. Back in the research lab, everyone's pupils dilated in shock simultaneously. The very next instant, the young doctoral researchers burst into cheers outright. We did it. We actually achieved the milestone, ranked 789th. Zhang was trembling all over, his eyes bloodshot with emotion. Li Chunhong clenched her fists tightly too. In that moment, pure elation exploded through the room. Yunhai City hadn't relied on luck to get here. It had relied on order and decisive execution. Someone shouted urgently, what about the reward? Surely rank 789 doesn't come with nothing. That same voice continued speaking. Your civilization has received the rank 789 milestone reward. 1 mid-tier transcendent plant and 12 low-tier transcendent plants. A random plant within your civilization's territory will undergo mutation. Rewards are currently being transmitted. The very next instant, several beams of white light descended from the sky, scattering directly across every corner of Yunhai City. Someone in the lab cried out in shock. Where did that white light even come from? Nobody knew for certain. It appeared just like a meteor shower streaking down. Professor Zhang's eyes lit up completely. 13 transcendent plants total, and one of them qualified as mid-tier. What did that actually mean in practical terms? If even a single one of them was related to food production, the entire food crisis could potentially be solved outright. A stable city had just directly converted into tangible, real-world resources. Not empty slogans, not some symbolic reward, but something that could genuinely save lives. Zhang immediately turned to Li Chunhong. Mr. Li, we absolutely must locate these plants immediately. Otherwise, this reward will have been claimed for nothing. If some crucial plant ends up destroyed by wild animals before we find it, that would be genuinely infuriating. Li Chunhong snapped back into focus and couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, I'll contact the local militia units right away. As she spoke, she glanced up toward the sky. We really did get a head start on everyone else this time. But then, almost immediately, her brow furrowed. Still, only rank 789th. We're only on our second day inside the safe zone, and we only managed to secure this milestone thanks to Chen Fan's information reaching us in time, which meant 788 other civilizations had already beaten us to it. Zhang considered this for a moment. Given how quickly this happened, who knows what alien civilizations out there are capable of. Some might have technology far beyond ours and hadn't experienced anywhere near this level of chaos to begin with. Still, this result is genuinely impressive. Li Chunhong nodded in agreement. We can't afford to get overconfident though. Let's go. Let's go see exactly what these transcendent plants actually are. Plenty of witnesses had spotted where the beams of white light had touched down, and combined with a thorough search by the militia units, all 13 transcendent plants were quickly located and placed under careful protection. These weren't just ordinary weeds. This represented genuine wealth for the entirety of Yunhai City. As for the so-called random selection, it truly had been random. Among the 13 plants, most turned out to be common weeds, foxtail grass, morning glory, even a phoenix tree, and a pine tree, all mutated, though nobody yet knew exactly what practical use they'd serve. All anyone could really say for now was that the future looked genuinely promising. However, 2 of those 13 plants immediately set the entire room ablaze with excitement. The first one turned out to be rice. It was growing at a rate visible to the naked eye. Grain after grain of rice sat plump and swollen, each one the size of a soybean. Someone's voice trembled. "This is rice. Does it have the ability to reproduce? Get it appraised immediately." A young girl stepped forward. She was one of the appraisal ability users, and across the entirety of Yunhai City, only 3 people had ever awakened that particular ability. She stared at the rice, her eyes widening, her face flushing red. A long moment passed. Then she stumbled and sat down hard. "It does," she said. "It has reproductive capability. Both its yield and its growth rate are far higher than normal rice. It also contains a small amount of protein. Extremely nutritious." The whole room fell silent instantly. Then, a wave of restrained cheering broke out. Food. This was food. Yunhai City might actually be saved. Zhang immediately caught the girl to steady her. "You've worked hard," he said. "Get some proper rest." That appraisal alone made everything worth it. If they could scale this up properly, Yunhai City's food crisis stood a genuine chance of being resolved entirely. Right after that, everyone rushed over to the second key site. It was a large peach tree, its small peaches of vivid green, glistening with freshness, giving off an irresistibly sweet fragrance. But this was no ordinary peach tree because it actively attacked. A cat passing by, tempted by the peaches, got struck instantly by one of the tree's branches. Someone gasped audibly. This was the mid-tier transcendent plant. Dangerous, certainly, but its fruit had to be something extraordinary. Another appraisal ability user attempted to read it. The result left her face completely pale. The appraisal failed outright. Zhang immediately said, "The peach tree's tier is probably higher than her ability level allows. Get some rest. Don't push yourself." As dawn approached, all 13 plants had been fully confirmed and cataloged. Li Chunhong immediately gave the order. "Find some way to transplant them into greenhouses. Assign guards immediately, especially for this peach tree. Keep children away from it entirely." The soldiers nodded, understood. Everyone in the room finally allowed themselves to relax and laugh. Someone, staring at the peach tree, couldn't help but ask, could this thing eventually turn into one of those legendary immortality peach trees, the kind where a single bite extends your lifespan? "It's not entirely impossible," someone replied, "though personally I think using it for medicine first is the safer bet." Meanwhile, back on the Pangu Continent, winter had arrived. Heavy snow blanketed the entire landscape. Every step sank deep into the snowdrifts. Every breath instantly turned to frost in the freezing air. I wrapped my fire salamander leather coat tightly around myself, standing atop a high ridge, staring off into the distance at that monstrous, towering plant. A high-tier transcendent species, the giant man-eating flower, at least 1,000 years old, likely cultivated originally by the Meda civilization. Its fruit apparently offered tremendous benefits for biological evolution. In this current cold, it had fallen into a semi-dormant state, its predatory capabilities significantly diminished. Still, if I charged in carelessly, it would still kill and eat me without hesitation. Its stats still read as nothing but question marks. I narrowed my eyes. Semi-dormant, that was a real opportunity here. The problem was, how exactly was I supposed to approach it? Time to grab some of that fruit. I grumbled a bit while wrapping my coat tighter. This weather was absolutely brutal, 30 or 40 degrees below zero. "Old wolf," I called out, "come here." He reluctantly shuffled over. He let out a low whimper, his meaning obvious enough. "It's the dead of winter. Why are you even out here right now?" The wolves of the Pangu Continent had evolved hibernation as a survival strategy against the harsh environment. Before winter hit, they gorged themselves relentlessly, fattening up as much as possible, then huddled together for warmth through the cold months. Only the old wolf stayed awake, since he'd essentially become my personal dog by this point. With food always guaranteed, he had no real need to hibernate anymore. Today I was heading out to score something big. No venomous insects, no venomous snakes around right now. This was prime time for scavenging and looting. The moment that thought crossed my mind, my eyes lit up with excitement. Shield in my left hand, dagger in my right, I trudged through the snow straight toward my target. Before long, I spotted a large, swollen mound rising up from the terrain. Atop that mound stood a massive plant, towering a full 100 meters tall, its branches heavy with fruit, shaped like giant corn cobs. My explorer's eye supplied the details. Mid-tier transcendent plant, family Poaceae, genus Zea, at least 1,000 years old, an enormous specimen of corn. It had evolved from a simple annual herb into a massive perennial woody plant entirely. Its fruit and seeds were incredibly nutrient-dense. I stared at that corn, practically drooling. I'd had my eye on this thing for a good while now, but wherever there's treasure, there's usually a guardian too. Sleeping inside a hollow at the corn tree's base was a massive bear. My explorer's eye flashed a warning. A powerful Pangu gray bear, standing 2.8 meters tall, weighing nearly a full metric ton. Long-term consumption of this corn had triggered a transcendent evolution in it. Ability, monstrous strength tree, slap. Transcendent rank, 1. My mouth twitched involuntarily. One solid slap from that thing, and I'd be gone instantly, wouldn't I? I had no intention of fighting it head-on, since there was really no need to. My fire salamander meat supply was still substantial. 1 pound a day would last me another 1,800 days easily. Plus, there were 2 cubs curled up right beside the mother bear. I muttered quietly to myself, cubs can't lose their mother. I'll just grab some corn and slip away quietly. I turned and told the old wolf, you go distract her. The old wolf's back legs immediately started trembling, his expression shifting entirely. Come on, buddy, I'm rank 0 here. Look at you being such a coward. It's only a rank 1 transcendent creature. In the end, I dropped the idea of sending him to his death. While she's still asleep, I'll handle this myself. With that settled, I told the old wolf to stand watch and crept toward the corn tree alone. In the distance, the mother bear's snoring rumbled steadily. I quietly climbed up the corn tree. I snapped one off, and wow! This single ear of corn was half a meter long, weighing several dozen pounds. I immediately stuffed it into my storage space. 1 ear, 2 ears, 10 ears, 20 ears. That should be enough. But the very next instant, a roar erupted. The mother bear had woken up. The moment she spotted me stealing her corn, she flew into an instant rage and immediately started climbing the tree, ready to smash me flat. In the distance, the old wolf let out a nervous bark. Woof, 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 achieving absolutely zero distraction effect whatsoever. I couldn't help but curse at him under my breath, utterly useless as usual. I leapt down, landing in the snow below. I immediately raised my shield with my left hand, the spider eye pattern facing directly toward the mother bear. Easy now, buddy. Let's talk this through calmly. See? I never actually took anything of yours. The mother bear's gaze locked onto the eyeball pattern on my shield and visibly flinched in surprise. Then she glanced toward the corn tree, then back at me. Was some of her corn actually missing? But since I wasn't holding any visible corn in my hands, the mother bear grew even angrier, slamming her massive paw down into the snow. A deep growl rumbled out of her. The transcendent spark in my mind flickered faintly, my presence radiating outward. The exceptional tear dagger in my hand caught the snow's glow, gleaming a dull gold. I said coldly, Mother Bear, take one more step forward, and I'll have no choice but to make bear paw stew tonight. The bear hesitated. Her animal instincts were sharp, and she clearly sensed that dagger could easily slice straight through her hide. I spread my arms wide and shouted loudly, roaring while slowly backing away, maintaining that necessary presence in the standoff against a wild beast. Right then, 2 little cubs poked their heads up from the snow, whimpering softly, their dark round eyes fixed intently on me. My mouth twitched. I reached into my storage space with my right hand, and a fish materialized in my grip. The mother bear froze. A fish? Where had that come from? I nodded at her. Mother bear, this one's on me. Come back anytime and I'll treat you again. I swung my arm, sending the fish arcing through the air, landing directly in the bear's open mouth. Startled, she spat it right back out, sniffed it curiously. Fresh. She was clearly wavering now. How long had it been since she'd had proper fish? You're honestly not such a bad guy, huh? Next, I tossed over 2 egg yolk-filled pastries, actually fire salamander meat wrapped around bird eggs, something enormously appealing to wild animals. The 2 cubs immediately scrambled to grab them. The mother bear let out a furious roar and swatted both her children away with a single paw. Didn't your mother teach you anything? Anything a stranger throws your way, mom eats first. She looked back up, but by then I'd already vanished without a trace. Corn successfully secured, I made my way back home, lecturing the old wolf along the way. See that? Life out here isn't just about violence and killing. It's about knowing how to handle people. Or in this case, bears. Build good relations today, and tomorrow you won't need to steal or fight for corn ever again. You can just eat it freely instead. The old wolf clearly admired me for this. The wolf pack had never dared get anywhere near that particular bear before. Yet here I was, walking away from her den with corn in hand. Still, I didn't head straight home, because my scavenging expedition was only just getting started. Next, I made my way toward the venomous wasp queen's territory. I'd secured the corn. Now it was time to grab some mutated honey too. Honey corn cakes. I've been waiting a long time for this. This particular swarm of bees lived symbiotically alongside the man-eating flower. The flower never preyed on them, and in exchange, they'd spent generations collecting its nectar, evolving rapidly as a result. Each individual bee had grown to the size of a fist, and the venomous wasp queen herself qualified as a minor boss-tier threat in her own right. But winter was their natural enemy. Right now, now they were all huddled together deep inside their hive, conserving warmth as a group. This hive itself was massive, 20 to 30 meters in diameter. The moment I got close, bees immediately burst out, buzzing furiously. I retreated instantly. They flew right back inside to stay warm. How had they even noticed me approaching? A frontal approach clearly wouldn't work, so I'd have to go in from below instead. I pulled out a shovel and started digging a hidden tunnel through the snow layer, working my way steadily toward the base of the hive. Then, gripping Daedalus's hide-cutting knife firmly, I gave it a gentle poke. The blade sank straight into the hive without resistance. An exceptional tier weapon, absurdly powerful. I pulled the dagger back out, coated in a waxy yellow fluid. I tasted a bit of it. Not honey, slightly fishy. I'd hit larvae instead. I carefully pried out several bee larvae and stuffed them straight into the old wolf's mouth. His expression lit up instantly. Practically ecstatic, he nearly choked on them from sheer excitement. I collected a few more, filling up a small container completely, then immediately pulled back. I repositioned and tried again, poking the hive at a different spot. This time, luck was finally on my side. Golden honey trickled down along the blade of the dagger. I dabbed a bit onto my tongue and tasted it. My eyes lit up instantly. This winter, I'd be eating well. I pulled out a glass jar and carefully collected the honey, that rich amber liquid pooling inside the clear container like some oversized gemstone. I filled up a few jars, then stopped myself deliberately. Sustainability mattered here. I couldn't get greedy and take everything. Today's haul was already substantial, but still I wasn't fully satisfied yet, because what I really wanted was the fruit from that giant man-eating flower itself. Those dragon fruit-like fruits had been tempting me relentlessly for months now. Once winter passed, this opportunity would disappear entirely. Even if I leveled up to rank 2 or rank 3 eventually, taking that flower head-on would still be nearly impossible. I stared off into the distance, my expression turning fiercely determined. I had to get some of that fruit. There was no other option. The plan itself was simple enough. Dig a tunnel underground. If I'd managed to sneak past the bees undetected, surely I could sneak past the man-eating flower too. I waved the old wolf off. Go home and eat your fish. I've got one big job left to handle. Hearing that, the old wolf ran off without even glancing back. He'd clearly had more than enough of this brutal winter cold already. After gorging himself on royal jelly, curling up in the den to rest was clearly the priority now. I grabbed my shovel and started digging a tunnel through the snow. The man-eating flower's territory spanned a full kilometer. Once I got too cold to bear it, I'd smear on a bit more honey for warmth, then keep going. The shovel struck the ground again and again and again. I realized I genuinely had grown stronger, not just in raw strength, but in willpower too. Digging a full kilometer of tunnel would take several days at minimum. If the man-eating flower ever detected me during that process, all my effort would be wasted instantly. So I switched to digging at night and burying myself completely motionless in the snow during daylight hours. The old me wouldn't have even dared consider something like this. But now I just did it. No hesitation at all. Sooner or later, I'd have to leave this place behind. Milestones, personal strength, all of it ultimately served one single purpose: getting back home to humanity. But then a thought pushed right back at me. Could I actually make it back though? The Meta civilization's records alone could take an entire lifetime to fully absorb. How many total tiers did the Transcendent ranking system even have? 10? 100? 1,000? In the end, both my mind and my body arrived at the exact same answer together. I absolutely had to get home. My thoughts drifted back to Earth, to that gentle, elegant girl I remembered. One sunlit, radiant morning, she'd been wearing a pink knit sweater, moving like a happy little deer, and then she'd bumped straight into my arms. That single moment had stayed with me for a long, long time. My expression suddenly turned awkward. What was her name again? What was it? A wave of nameless frustration spread through me. The shovel nearly slipped right out of my grip. Right at that exact moment, the transcendent spark in my mind suddenly jolted violently. I snapped back to full alertness instantly. Something's wrong. Something's genuinely wrong with me. My pioneer's eye immediately flashed a warning. Current status: mild hypothermia, pollen intoxication. My face changed color instantly. Pollen. This thing could even attack through the air like this? I activated my pocket dimension immediately, shielding myself completely. The next moment, I was gasping heavily for breath, my transcendent spark pulsing rapidly, working overtime to purge the toxins accumulating in my lungs and brain. I'd always assumed the man-eating flower's biggest threat was its vines and tendrils. Turns out, a little airborne pollen alone had nearly killed me outright. And this was still just winter. If it were spring instead, one single breath probably would have finished me off entirely. I wiped away the cold sweat beading on my forehead. I'd come this far already. No backing down now. Lesson learned, though, meant proceeding with even greater caution going forward. Dig for an hour, retreat into my pocket dimension to rest, repeat. Progress was absurdly slow, but I refused to stop because this particular job absolutely had to get done. Several days later, buried deep in the snow, I suddenly heard a distant wolf's howl echoing across the landscape. It was the old wolf, wasn't it? I didn't respond. The man-eating flower's territory was far too dangerous. I didn't dare make a sound. The old wolf didn't dare venture in either. He stood on a high ridge, howling steadily for a while, then eventually gave up and left. I understood understood exactly what he was doing. He was searching for me. The next day, he returned again. This time, he howled continuously for an entire day straight. On the third day, he came back once more. An animal's emotional bond is remarkably simple and pure. He'd come to regard me as the single most important thing in his entire existence. I'd vanished, and it terrified him. I stayed silent for a long moment, then kept digging anyway. On the seventh day, I finally reached my destination. The man-eating flower's branches and leaves blotted out the entire sky above, and strangely, the snow directly beneath it was noticeably thinner. That actually made things more dangerous, not less. I had to proceed with even greater caution now. The massive trunk towered high above, occasionally shedding a single leaf that landed in the snow with a thud, hard as sheet metal. Before long, an overwhelming, oppressive presence bore down on me from above. My breath caught in my throat involuntarily. This truly was the region's undisputed apex predator, its presence dwarfing even the fire salamander by an enormous margin. I carefully cleared away the snow layer bit by bit, and finally, I saw them. Under the moonlight, fruit after fruit hung heavy and glistening from the branches above, translucent and jewel-like. The nearest cluster hung about 50 meters up. My pioneer's eye flashed information. An extraordinary fruit brimming with concentrated life energy, typically requiring at least 300 years to fully mature. The largest fruits had apparently grown alongside the entire rise and fall of the Meta civilization itself, potentially nearing 1,000 years old. Countless creatures had died trying to reach even a single bite, becoming fertilizer for the man-eating flower's roots in the process. Rare tier, natural marvel. My eyes lit up instantly. This entire expedition had absolutely been worth it. I rubbed my numb, frozen fingers together, then pulled out Daedalus's hide-cutting knife. This exceptional tier dagger, I absolutely couldn't afford to lose it here. I tied a thin rope securely around the dagger's handle, then channeled my Transcendent Spark's power directly into my eyes and right arm. My target was crystal clear now, not the fruit itself, but the branch it hung from, right at the base. Sever the entire branch clean through, and dozens of fruits would all become mine at once. I locked onto my target and murmured quietly under my breath, whoosh. My fingers snapped forward with sudden force. The dagger shot forward like a bolt of lightning, striking precisely at the branch's base, carving a clean notch into it, just as expected. Again. Whoosh! Second strike landed true. Third strike. Fourth strike. The man-eating flower didn't erupt into immediate fury. Plants ultimately weren't animals after all. If it had been some wild beast instead, it would have already leapt up hunting for whoever was attacking it. But to this massive plant, this particular branch registered as nothing more significant than a single strand of hair. Hours passed, and the branch's base had been riddled with dense notch after notch, its structural integrity steadily weakening. Finally, after one more precisely aimed throw, the branch reached its absolute breaking point. The very next instant, crack, the entire branch snapped clean off. Branch, snow, and fruit came crashing down together in a heavy heap. One particularly translucent fruit rolled directly to a stop right in front of me. My heart pounded wildly. I'd actually done it. But I didn't rush forward immediately because the man-eating flower had woken up. A massive tremor rippled outward from the ground itself. Row after row of jagged, serrated pouches slowly began opening across its enormous frame. It was actively searching for its attacker. Without a second's hesitation, I activated my pocket dimension, vanishing completely. This disturbance had been far too significant. The man-eating flower thrashed and searched frantically all around. I stayed hidden inside my pocket dimension for 6 full hours, only emerging once everything outside had gone completely, thoroughly silent. Then I retreated back underground into my dugout shelter, lying motionless there for an entire day. Only once deep night fell again did I finally dig my way back toward the fruit and begin collecting it. 1, 2, 10. A full 42 fruits in total, ranging from pineapple-sized all the way up to watermelon-sized. Their sweet fragrance kept pushing insistently into my nose. My mouth watered uncontrollably, and I genuinely wanted to bite straight into one right then and there. But this location wasn't remotely safe yet. I stuffed every single fruit into my storage space. Then my attention caught on a nearby unopened flower bud, likely useful for some kind of pollen exchange purpose down the line. I held my breath, steeled my nerve, and carefully transferred that bud into storage as well. Mission complete, fruit secured, flower bud secured. This expedition had paid off spectacularly. I then began making my way back carefully, retracing my original path. Half a day later, I had finally cleared the man-eating flower's entire territory completely. Standing safely outside its danger zone, I turned back for one final look at that colossal creature. In that moment, an overwhelming rush of satisfaction surged straight to my head. I hadn't beaten it head-on in direct combat, but I'd beaten it through pure cleverness instead. That was intelligence. That was what it meant to be human. I burst out laughing and immediately took off running, heading home to finally enjoy this incredible fruit. A full kilometer away, the old wolf heard my footsteps instantly and came bursting out of the snow, howling with pure excitement, slipping and sliding the entire way over. He tumbled down, scrambled back up, tumbled again, scrambled up again, and finally leapt as high as he possibly could, nearly knocking me flat entirely. He genuinely believed I was dead. He might have even been mentally preparing to inherit my legacy at this point. And instead, here I was, alive and back home after all. His joy clearly wasn't an act in the slightest. slightest. I reached out and rubbed his big furry head affectionately. All right, that's enough. Tonight, the two of us are eating like kings. The snow kept falling steadily as one man and one wolf trudged together through the drifts, heading straight home.